EmMajority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
EmMajority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, October 19th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Spencer Headworth, author of Rules of the Road, the Automobile, and the Transformation of American Criminal Justice. Meanwhile, more than 500 anti-Zionist peace protesters arrested in D.C. yesterday in demonstrations led by progressive Jewish groups. Amazing, brave people. I love them. Early forensics inconclusive about which side caused the hospital explosion that killed hundreds in Gaza. However, many of Israel's immediate claims about the facts, I should say, surrounding the blast have already been debunked, and Israel has bombed hospitals before. The death toll in Gaza now surpasses 3,800. Violence and protests escalate in the West Bank as well. And a senior State Department official resigns in protest over Biden's support for Israel's attack on Gaza. Also, as the Biden administration prepares to seek $100 billion in aid to Israel, along with $60 billion for Ukraine. Once Congress gets its crap together, or at least the Republican Party does, and we might be waiting on that for a while, because after losing the second speaker vote by more than he did in the first round, Jim Jordan's not seeking a third vote today. Womp womp. Republicans will try to give the temporary speaker, Patrick McHenry, more powers, working with Democrats potentially on that. Iowa GOP Congresswoman Mariannette Miller Meeks, that's a mouthful of a name, says that... What'd you say?
Triple M.
Triple M. She should go by MMM. Like AOC? Whatever. Says she received death threats for not supporting Jim Jordan. Sidney Powell takes a plea deal in the Georgia case. She'll plead guilty and avoid jail time, but will also have to testify against others like Trump. Flip the Kraken, baby. And Trump's request to delay the civil January 6th trial denied by a judge. Biden's set to pause efforts to collect money from PPP loan scammers. Jobless claims are at their lowest level since January. The labor market remains hot. And lastly, Cornel West gets a max donation from Clarence Thomas's infamous benefactor, Harlan Crow. That's not great. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. Hope you had a great hump day in my absence. I was supposedly a day of disconnection from the news for me, and I failed spectacularly at that.
Yeah, at the end of the show yesterday, I said, I'm sure Emma is probably scanning her phone right now, and I went on your Twitter profile and went to the likes tab, and you had about 8 from the past half hour.
I thought all of that was private. Why are you tracking me? It's honestly
a violation.
It's a total violation of my obsessive privacy. Or my privacy surrounding my obsessive nature, I should say. Yeah, I mean, I can't unplug from this. It's like that's the thing. I mean, we're all in this business, I think, because we care. It's definitely not for like the millions of dollars that people at the Daily Wire make. And I can't shut off caring, and I want to look straight in the face of these horrors and not back away and not put my hand in or put my head under this in the sand. And you know, I said this a few minutes ago in headlines, but I am so inspired by what I saw yesterday in Washington, D.C. We're going to play some clips of that here. There were mass protests, thousands, more than 5,000 Jewish Americans, according to Mondo Weiss, and others gathered at the National Mall, and Rashida Tlaib spoke, Cori Bush spoke, protesting, demanding a ceasefire, saying that this will be not in our name was one of the hashtags and slogans that these progressive Jewish groups were using to call for a ceasefire and say end to the massacres in Gaza. Here is Rashida Tlaib speaking at that rally, and just want to say I am in awe of her bravery, because it has been on the front lines of threats and accusations.
Yeah, you want to talk
by
about death
crazed
threats.
Republicans, exactly, and it's not going to stop. And yet she refuses to back down.
And her staff too. Also, like the way that they interface with law enforcement, and they have to rely on like things like the FBI to follow up on things like that.
Yep.
And you know, yeah, there's a lot of tremendous amount of bravery, not only by Rashida but everybody working on her staff.
Here she is.
I wish all the Palestinian people would see this. I wish they can see that not all of America want them to die. That they are not disposable. They have a right to live. They didn't ask to be born in occupation. And so I just want to thank you on the bottom of my heart. The dehumanization has chipped at my soul, and I can't imagine what it's made so many other people feel. So you all being here to speak truth, because the warmongers are out, y'all. They are ready. They want to kill and not stop. It's pure insanity. I still remember the cry of Maya, who's being dragged out of that festival, crying for her father. But just like poor Shama in Gaza, who is #1 in her scores. I don't know if you know anything about Palestinian culture, but it's a big deal that somebody from Gaza could score #1 on her. You know, it's like the valedictorian for the whole Palestinian people. And both of them are victims. They're victims of the oppression, of the violence. They both deserve to live. I don't care what their faith is or their ethnicity. Maya didn't deserve to be targeted. Neither did Shaman deserve to die. And that's the common humanity that we all have to remember, because they're trying to take it away from us.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure it doesn't happen. Not on our watch. I'm going to be real with you all. My colleagues, many of them, I usually don't talk smack about them. No, I'm usually considerate, because I don't like them policing me, so I don't police them. But as an American, not just as a member of the United States Congress, I am ashamed. I am ashamed that they're saying, not yet, maybe next week. Not yet, Rashida. Maybe in a couple of days. How many more have to die?
That's the question. I mean, the death toll that we know, and it's got to be much higher. I mean, there are bodies under rubble. 3,800. And counting. How many will satisfy the bloodlust of the Israeli government? We're talking 5,000?
The answer they have is more.
10,000?
More.
20,000? What's the threshold for these members to call for a ceasefire? 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. How much blood? Like, is there some sort of, I don't know, leader amount? Not to be crass, but this is what we're talking about here. I wish that we had representatives that all had the bravery that Rashida Tlaib and the rest of the squad has. I mean, they've been pretty consistent on this. The 13 that signed that ceasefire resolution, including AOC, Jamal Bowman, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar.
I would say shout out to Greg Kassar because he has not been great on this issue, throwing BDS under the bus in the campaign, but I was not expecting him to sign on to that ceasefire, and I'm glad he did, and good on his staff for pushing him on that.
Exactly, especially because he signed previously in the days prior that we support Israel essentially unconditionally resolution. So this was a welcome about face from him on that front, or at least an attempt at kind of winning back some of that goodwill. But yes, it's just not enough. And let's play Naomi Klein here as well, who spoke, because as I mentioned, many of those protesters, I mean, this was organized by progressive Jewish groups like Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now. There were thousands of Jewish Americans saying this is not representative of what we want. We do not want this. We want a ceasefire. And it's important to elevate those voices because there are real forces in our politics and in the media that want to conflate Zionism with Judaism. And frankly, that is an anti-Semitic conception, because Jewish people are more than the more nationalistic impulses or expansionist impulses of the Israeli government. It's reductive at the very least,
it's
and
and
it's anti-Semitic at the other end.
It serves Israel's national interest.
And why, of course, then to that point, that's why you see someone like Ron DeSantis and the Republican Party engaging in it. Do you think that they've suddenly come to this issue in a way that's like egalitarian and not bigoted? Are you kidding me?
Right.
And the 24 rabbis that got arrested, they're standing firm in their morality. The other activists, the other Jewish activists that got arrested and protested as well, they understand that they're the ones who are being morally consistent on this front.
And the Israelis themselves who have to go into hiding, like the one journalist, for opposing the bombing of Gaza.
And Naomi Klein is another person who, I don't like to have a ton of heroes, but in this business, she's somebody that I look up to, especially as a woman. This is her speaking at those demonstrations yesterday.
I have never seen anything like this in my history of Jewish anti-Zionist activism. It's been decades. We used to be tiny. We are huge and growing. We have a sacred responsibility to engage with our parents, our grandparents, our uncles, our brothers and sisters, and try to save their souls, to keep them from indulging in this quest for bloody vengeance. We are here because we will not let our fears of anti-Semitism be manipulated in this way as cover for war crimes and colonial land grabs, and to foreclose on the possibility of a political solution, which will only come with an end to occupation, with an end to apartheid, with true Palestinian freedom and self-determination. We will not use the fact that many of our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents were refugees from genocide to justify making hundreds of thousands or even millions of new Palestinian refugees. These are not our leaders. Not in the Knesset with its so-called unity government, and not here in Congress, which reconvenes now in part in order to approve new money and new weapons to send to Israel for its genocidal attack on Palestinians.
Genocidal. I mean, she speaks with incredible clarity, as she always does. Some of the protesters, Washington Post reported that they were waving signs, "Our blood is the same color." My grief is not your weapon. Zionism is racism. Much of what Naomi Klein said right there. And the more and more that message gets out there, the more and more it's going to become untenable, hopefully, for the Biden administration to continue with this position. Because, frankly, I understand that he has to make some sort of... He has to promote Netanyahu in public in order to make certain pleas behind the scenes. And some reporting said from local Israeli papers that Biden was sitting in on the war planning meetings, which...
I better hope it doesn't go really poorly then, because it's going to look bad.
Well, it sounds horrible on its face, but it also, from Biden's perspective, is likely an effort to attempt to mitigate the most genocidal impulses of this Netanyahu government. Yeah, so we're getting to a point though where, I mean, Biden needs to. It's over trying to just do that soft power behind the scenes. He needs to come out strongly for a ceasefire and an end to the bloodshed, which is completely, obviously untenable. And before we head to our guests, I did want to play just some footage of the actual protests as well. These are some of the hundreds of pro-Palestinian demonstrators that are in the Cannon House building in Washington, D.C., chanting "Not in our name."
Hundreds of whom have been arrested, I believe, since then, right?
Yep. Amazing. Wonderful. And if you want to get involved, everybody should go to Jewish Voice for Peace, and if not now, because I know that this is not the end of their activism on this front.
And they're also under attack by ADL, and I've seen other people. I mean, obviously Ben Shapiro. So
yeah, it really is important to show solidarity with these demonstrators. And if you can, I would encourage you to get involved in local demonstrations in your area. Be careful. I know sometimes it's a little difficult because there have been reports that employers are watching people's social media activity on this front fairly carefully. So just make sure that you're in a place that you are okay with putting yourself out there like that. But even if you're not, there are ways to help behind the scenes and show solidarity to people, because I think there are a lot of folks that feel alone. I've spoken to Jewish friends behind the scenes who are afraid to say anything because of how their parents are going to react. One friend joked to me, I feel like I'm going to get written out of the family will based on what I say on this.
I mean, some of that's going to absolutely happen.
And Naomi Klein hit on it. There is a generational divide, I think. And there are young progressive Jews that don't want to be associated with an apartheid system, that don't want to be associated with a genocide that is ramping up at this moment. And those are the people that give me a lot of hope. And seeing that yesterday was the first moment of real, I would say, like a silver lining or some flicker of hope in the situation. So I can't thank everybody out there enough who put their bodies on the line and got arrested for this cause that could not be more important. With that said, we will get to our guests in a moment, but we have a word from one of our sponsors, and that sponsor is Stamps.com. Christmas, Hanukkah, it's coming up, other holidays, and the holiday rush means more mailing and shipping for your business. But it doesn't have to mean more stress. Stamps.com has been helping businesses like yours save time and money for 25 years, and it can help you get ready for the holiday ramp-up. All you need is Stamps.com's premium rates for all your postage needs. With Stamps.com, all you need is a computer and a printer. They even send you a free scale, so you'll have everything you need to get started. Now, taking care of orders on the go is even easier with Stamps.com and their mobile app. If you need a package pickup, you can easily schedule it through Stamps.com's dashboard. And if you sell products online, Stamps.com seamlessly connects with every major marketplace and shopping cart. Stamps.com also offers premium discounts and supplies at your fingertips. Running low? Order shipping and mailing supplies, labels, and even printers from the supply store. Get huge carrier discounts up to 84% off at off USPS and UPS rates to help your bottom line. Plus, Stamps.com automatically tells you your cheapest and fastest shipping options. For 25 years, Stamps.com has been indispensable for over 1 million businesses. Get access to the USPS and UPS services you need right from your computer, anytime, day or night. No lines, no traffic, no waiting. Sign up with promo code Majority Report, one word, for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a free digital scale. That's promo code Majority Report. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top page, and enter code Majority Report. Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top page, and enter code Majority Report, one word. Thank you to Stamps.com for sponsoring this program. All right, quick break, and when we come back, we'll be speaking to Spencer Headworth. We are back, and we are joined now by Spencer Headworth, Associate Professor of Sociology at Purdue University, author of Rules of the Road, the Automobile and the Transformation of American Criminal Justice. Spencer, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
So, yes, good to have you. Your book focuses on how the car completely transformed policing in this country. We've had guests like, Paris Marx on and others to speak about how the car has transformed, urban spaces, transformed the way that we structure our society physically. But I never thought about it really in the context of policing and criminal justice. I guess let's just start there with the overall thesis and findings of the book.
Sure. Yeah. The overall idea of the book is that to understand the development of American criminal justice over the 20th and the 21st centuries, we really need to reckon with the pivotal role that cars and driving have played in a number of key developments. The origination of the idea of police as these generalists that were going to have wide authority and wide discretion really hinged on the assignment of traffic duty to police in the early 20th century. There could have been a different direction taken there, but the direction that was taken was that we're going to put this on the plate of police, and that has really largely created many of the aspects of modern policing that we recognize today. And then moving forward through the 20th century, key developments in the Fourth Amendment and search and seizure hinge on the role of cars and driving and vehicle stops. Vehicle stops quickly become the predominant way that Americans directly interact with law enforcement officers. That's the most common way that we interact with police. And then moving, into more recent years, key developments in surveillance technology, location tracking, automated license plate readers, all these types of things reflect the sort of ongoing adjustment of the criminal law and criminal law enforcement to developments resulting from the capacity for travel that automobiles enable.
Yeah, I mean, so let's start there. When the explosion of the car happened at the start of the 20th century, and I didn't realize how bloody this situation was. Like, just Americans getting killed on the streets all the time because there were cars that were getting sold, people were buying them. Maybe you didn't know how to drive them fully, and also our streets were just not equipped to handle it at that point. Take us to that point in history and how that began to shape what you're discussing here.
Sure. Yeah. So, as in lots of situations, the law and law enforcement institutions are really playing catch up to the development of this new technology, which diffused rapidly across the country. And as you indicate, urban infrastructure was simply not equipped to handle cars. Many people who were operating them didn't really know what they were doing. There was, at first, of course, no official licensure, no driving examination required. It was really a free-for-all. And yeah, it was carnage to a large extent on especially urban streets in cities throughout the country as cars rapidly proliferate. And one of the statistics that I cite in the book is during the year and a half or so that the United States was involved in World War I, more people died from car collisions in the United States than died fighting overseas. Wow. So this, created a real need for a response, and the law enforcement, police departments in various cities did their best, I think, to adapt to this situation. And the legal changes that we see emerging from this time period include things like the creation of jaywalking as a crime. And within a decade or so, we moved from a situation in which the street was much more of a multi-use space, right? At the turn of the 20th century, you would have horse-drawn vehicles and pedestrians and people selling things in the street, children playing in the street. And within about a decade, 15, 20 years, certainly, the street had been legally and socially redefined as a space for automobiles only.
Yeah, I mean, the crime of jaywalking, can you talk a bit about how the car manufacturers had a role in the creation of that designation and making that illegal?
Sure. So Jay, for those who aren't aware, I wasn't before I started doing the research for this book. Jay was a slur. It meant like, an uneducated or unsophisticated person from a rural area. So the creation of this crime of jaywalking, it was a propaganda effort on the part of automobile manufacturers and organizations for motorists like the American Automobile Association to sort of redefine the idea of crossing the street outside of a designated crosswalk or crossing the street not at right angles, to redefine that socially as the act of an unsophisticated person who had no business being in the city, right? So you get this, sort of social disparaging aspect that then is quickly formally adopted into the law.
With some backlash too, or with some debate. I mean, I didn't realize that it was considered offensive by certain people when they were debating the adoption of jaywalking laws, but now it's just everywhere.
Certainly, right? So we see this, throughout different things when we get changes in the law, that what was originally contentious and considered objectionable by many people very quickly came to be just taken for granted, right? That's just the way it is. Of course, it only makes sense to cross at designated crosswalks and so forth. And, one of the things I note in the book is like a lot of aspects of the car-centric policing and criminal punishment system, there are major racial disparities in jaywalking now, with African Americans much more likely to be arrested and cited for jaywalking relative to their overall proportion of the population.
Gotcha. And another thing I didn't think about is how prohibition contributed to this as well. You write about that in, I think, your third chapter. How did prohibition ramp up this policing becoming indelibly linked to the car, both in the crimes that they're targeting and in the fact that soon enough police forces were highly motorized?
Sure. So prior to prohibition, there were some laws on the books outlawing certain substances and so on and so forth. But the arrival of prohibition marked the first time in U.S. history when law enforcement was engaged in a concerted, systematic effort of searching for contraband. This was the first time that the type of activity that seems very familiar to us now was really becoming a major part of the law enforcement enterprise. And the business of bootlegging and rum running and moonshining and all of those, fun terms that we associate with the period of prohibition ran through automobiles, right? That was how the illegal alcohol was being transported for retail sale and so on and so forth. And so police around the country, federal law enforcement and state and local law enforcement operating under color of federal law, found themselves wanting to search all these vehicles. So one of the major legal and social consequences of prohibition when it comes to this interaction between cars and criminal justice is a 1925 decision called Carroll versus United States that was about warrant requirements for searches. And that decision established what we now know as the quote unquote automobile exception to search warrant requirements. So at that time, William Howard Taft was Chief Justice of the United States, and he wrote the majority opinion for the court in Carroll, and they reasoned that a law enforcement officer wishing to search a vehicle did not have time to go out and get a warrant because the vehicle could be relocated, right, by the time that warrant would be obtained. Therefore, the court reasoned law enforcement needed to be empowered to make discretionary decisions about when to search. When a search was legally justified and reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. And that's where the probable cause standard in Fourth Amendment jurisprudence really comes into play, where in the Carroll decision, which is still good law for all intents and purposes, in the Carroll decision, the court held that an officer could make a determination of whether there was probable cause to believe that there was evidence of a crime currently occurring or having recently occurred in the vehicle, and if the officer made the determination that there was probable cause to believe that, then that officer was justified to conduct a full inspection of the interior of the vehicle and its occupants without the requirement of obtaining a search warrant. And that is a pivotal Fourth Amendment decision that really sets up a lot of subsequent Fourth Amendment jurisprudence.
Certainly, and then the weakening of the Fourth Amendment is indelibly linked to both, I would say, prohibition and then the subsequent war on drugs, where there's another loosening of those kinds of requirements. Like if a dog, I remember learning about this case in college, if a drug dog goes to the door of a home and they smell something, what does that mean? Does that constitute a search? Things of that nature, and the fact that this it didn't always need to be this way. Like we could live in a country where you could get pulled over, I guess, for a traffic stop, but that if the officer said they smelled weed on you or something, there was another reality in which that officer would have to obtain a warrant before they searched the car. But that's not how things went down. And the context of prohibition is so important there because you can see how criminalizing certain substances gives police more powers because of the, stated urgency of stopping the crime in those instances.
Yep, and as you suggest, and as I point out in the book, prohibition really is a precursor to the war on drugs in many ways, not least of which is the effect that it had on criminal organization. Prohibition functionally created the 20th century mafia in the United States as we know it by creating this huge black market for something for which there was a lot of demand. And there are strong parallels to the country's and the world's experience with the war on drugs and the effect that the robust black market for what are now illegal drugs has had on creating a massive profit stream for criminal organizations.
So I guess we can move past prohibition, and now we're in the middle of the 20th century. The police officers are now heavily motorized, and cars are central to that. How did that proliferation continue even after prohibition ended up ending?
Sure. So one of the big developments in the middle of the 20th century that I talk about is suburbanization. So with the sort of daily commuting that automobiles enabled for millions of Americans, we get this massive push to suburbanize, and that comes with the construction of highways that decimate urban neighborhoods, really creates the massive residential racial segregation that comes to characterize the United States, as well as further concentrating urban poverty and sort of creating these environments that we now associate with some of the most egregious overreaches and abuses in contemporary policing. And then as vehicle patrol becomes the predominant technology of American policing through the middle part of the 20th century, that's when we replace the cop on the beat, if you will, the officer who's walking around a neighborhood directly interacting with residents and so forth, with the cruiser and with the officer that is cruising through the neighborhood, passing through the neighborhood, not building those same types of connections with members of the community. And lots of people, I'm certainly not the only one, lots of people have mentioned or analyzed how this has affected police-community relations and helped contribute to the real deterioration of trust between police and their communities.
How did the development of interstate highways during this period also affect policing in this way? Did it federalize a lot of this stuff?
Sure. So automobiles in general, from the the early parts of the 20th century when they began to proliferate, created real sort of jurisdictional issues, because now it was much easier, especially in the more densely populated Northeast, where the states were smaller and state boundaries were closer. It was much easier to move between states, right? To commit a crime in one state and abscond to another, or something along those lines. So this, from the early part of the 20th century, really helped propel what people call the federalization of criminal justice and an expanding role for the federal government. So you get the FBI in the early part of the 20th century, before it was even called the FBI, back when it was called the Bureau of Investigation, enforcing laws like the Dyer Act, which criminalize the interstate transport of stolen vehicles. And that becomes the jurisdictional hook that allows the FBI to get involved in manhunts for John Dillinger and Bonnie and Clyde and these really kind of high-profile outlaws of the era. And as you move forward into the middle part of the 20th century, into the later part of the 20th century, interstate highways sort of supercharge that phenomenon, where especially certain types of crime, the transport of illegal drugs, the illegal transport of human beings, right? These are crimes that are definitionally interjurisdictional in almost every case, creating real issues if a state-level law enforcement agency wants to investigate and potentially help prosecute these types of offenses. And so the federal government really steps in and takes a much more prominent role in criminal justice, and particularly in addressing these types of offenses that are now almost by definition interstate in nature.
And then we get really to the 1970s, and the car is basically essential for people to get from point A to point B. We're building entire communities based on the car. Very little public transportation in terms of the way that many governments are prioritizing new development there. And we're also now seeing the drug war ramp up. what did the 1970s bring to this shift in policing?
Well, the acceleration of the drug war, I think, in the 70s is really a very crucial development. And, we're at this point, and especially once you get into the latter part of the 1970s and into the 1980s, that's when you're really seeing the rise of mass incarceration, right? Which is itself largely a product of the war on drugs and associated enforcement efforts. And this is also the period in the 70s when the federalization of law enforcement really kicks in a major way, in large part as a consequence of the federal government's role in the war on drugs, and this being a federally orchestrated enforcement measure. So beginning in the 70s and into the 80s and the 90s is when we get a lot of these federal omnibus crime bills and so forth that lead to federal criminal law largely duplicating state criminal laws, meaning that any given offense can, in almost every case, potentially be prosecuted either by federal authorities or state authorities. So that's another big development from that period.
Yeah, and then federalizing also the systems that come with that, which are racial profiling, because once these Fourth Amendment standards are dropped, it gives much more officer discretion. And what does officer discretion mean? It means that racist tropes can be replicated and also grafted onto one's supposedly, natural intuition. If you could just talk a bit about that as a replication of some of the racist politics in this country.
Sure. So I think sort of a key precedential point here is Terry versus Ohio, the 1968 Supreme Court decision, which authorized what we might call the pretextual stop or the investigatory stop. So the ability to temporarily detain someone based on quote unquote reasonable suspicion. And that precedent and then subsequent activity deriving therefrom really creates the opportunity for biases, especially along the lines of race and ethnicity, but along other lines as well, to factor heavily into what policing looks like in this country. And by empowering officers to make determinations about who is reasonably suspicious and who isn't, you are creating an environment that is conducive to people acting on the basis of biases, even if those biases, as I think they are in many cases, are unconscious or implicit or unstated. Even if officers, stopping someone to question them and perform kind of mini investigations either on the sidewalk or on the side of the road, even if they're not in any way explicitly or consciously motivated by racial bias, the fact is that there are strong stereotypes around race and criminality and dangerousness that are widespread across the American populace. And those biases, we know from a lot of empirical evidence about vehicle stops as well as pedestrian stops, those biases do tend to have an effect. They do tend to shape who officers see as suspicious, who they see as potentially involved in crime, and therefore who is more likely to experience one of these stops, whether it be a pedestrian stop or a vehicle stop.
I mean, and then we're kind of in the modern era now where we can see how traffic stops lead to disproportionate police violence against Black people. Sandra Bland is an infamous example of somebody who was killed in a jail cell or died in a jail cell after she was arrested because she didn't properly signal when she was changing lanes. And then, there are many more examples of this kind of police brutality. If you don't, if you could just bring that into the conversation.
Sure. So in 1996 is when we get Wren, like the bird but with an H, Wren versus United States, which explicitly extends the basic Terry precedent to the vehicular context, and explicitly in a unanimous decision written by the late Justice Scalia, explicitly says that officers are free to stop vehicles and temporarily detain people for any traffic violation of any kind, even if the purpose of the stop is not to enforce traffic law, even if the purpose of the stop is to conduct a miniature roadside investigation. So with that really formal blessing of this type of activity, yeah, we see an even greater prevalence of what Charles Epp and his colleagues in their book Pulled Over call the investigatory stop. And one of the points that they make very forcefully in that book, which I think is crucial for people to recognize, is that there is a real difference between a stop that is initiated for the purposes of traffic safety and a stop that is initiated for the purposes of one of these little mini roadside investigations, a pretextual stop that is only pretextually motivated by traffic safety. There are no, according to Epp and his colleagues' research and other people who've studied this systematically, there are no significant racial disparities in the rates at which people stop, at which police stop people for traffic safety violations. Those stops appear to be overwhelmingly triggered by people breaking traffic laws, right? Excessive speeding, running red lights, etc. Where all of the overall disparity in rates of vehicle stops by race comes from is the disparity in rates at which people are stopped for these investigatory purposes. So the quote unquote DWB, driving while black phenomenon, is largely explained, if not entirely explained, by differences in who police tend to see as suspicious and differences in who police target for these investigatory vehicle stops. And as you suggest, right, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, the list goes on and on of people, disproportionately black people and other people of color, who have experienced not only harassment, stops, arrests, criminal charges, but violence and death as a result of these policies.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's the added element of the seizure of people's cars as kind of publicly available property that can be taken in order to get people to pay back certain debts and things like that. That's completely been normalized by our society.
Yeah, so one of the chapters in the book, I attend to this phenomenon of civil asset forfeiture, which maybe you've talked about on your show before. It's gotten some attention, I think, especially recently. But these are laws at the state and federal level that authorize the government to seize and keep people's property based on probable cause, according to their assessment, to believe that that property was somehow involved in criminal activity, even if the person never faces criminal charges, even if they're never prosecuted or convicted of anything. The government can nevertheless seize property, and they do by the hundreds of millions of dollars annually. I connect this to cars in the book because the most common way that one of these civil asset forfeiture actions begins is with a vehicle stop, and a vehicle stop where police find cash or they find something else that leads them to believe that there might be some connection to criminal activity. That can authorize them to seize cash, seize the vehicle, seize other property, and keep it.
Well, this is a fascinating way to look at our history of criminal justice, and an important one. The book is called Rules of the Road, The Automobile and the Transformation of American Criminal Justice. We will put a link to the book wherever you're listening to or watching this, and at majority.fm. Spencer, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Emma. It's a pleasure.
All right. We are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to do one more story before we head into the fun half. Be right back. just one more story for you guys before we head into the fun half, because while, obviously the number one story every single day is what's happening in Gaza, the Republican Party is in a complete, just total mess of a situation that they created for themselves. A reminder for people, the reason that we are here right now and the reason that there is no Speaker of the House, except for obviously the temporary one, McHenry, is because Kevin McCarthy was so power hungry that he, after 15 rounds of voting, did a deal with the devil and said, hey, Matt Gaetz, crazy wing, I will grant this as a part of our agreement that to make me speaker, to crown me king, that you can at any point file a motion to vacate and that you can oust me from my position whenever you so choose, if the vote is successful. And McCarthy wanted to be speaker so badly that he agreed to that. And you know what? Gaetz did it. Gaetz did it. And so the Republican Party is scrambling, trying to find a new Speaker of the House. And we talked about this on the show the other day, and I'm sure Sam did yesterday as well. There are 18 House Republicans who are in Biden districts that Biden won last election cycle, or in 2020, I should say. And they feel very vulnerable right now, as they should, given the amount of negative partisanship that is out there about Republican extremism and chaos, personified by Donald Trump, but also personified by this fight in the House. And they were worried about electing the Trump pick, Jim Jordan, who is extreme and brash and has issues like, many credible accusations of him covering up sexual assault when he was at Ohio State. There are a lot of issues for frontline Republicans on that front from an electoral perspective. So many of them defected. Jim Jordan lost more votes the second round, and there were reports that the more moderate Republicans were staggering their the votes so that it would appear like Jordan was bleeding votes. So he's not even apparently, as of what we see now, right, Bradley, they're not bringing a vote to the floor today at all. They're going to instead shift their focus to empowering the temporary speaker with some more powers so that they can get business done, like sending military aid to Israel and to Ukraine, and then also to Taiwan. These are the things that they want to get done, especially given how dearly the Republican Party loves the Israeli apartheid regime. With all of that context, here is Representative Mike Lawler, who does not support Jim Jordan. Again, Trump endorsed Jim Jordan. The entire Fox establishment does not want, Fox News channel does not want to see the Republican Party to continue to be in this chaos, so they're in favor of Jim Jordan. But Lawler is not, and Fox and Friends is not happy with him. This is them grilling him after the second failed House speakership vote.
To do it. If we can't get those folks in a room with folks like me in swing districts and the folks that are now opposed to Jordan, we're never going to be able to build consensus.
But you're one of the people that are opposed. But we're respectfully, Congressman, the Gaetz thing is past us now. We have a new nominee that's on the floor, and the question is, why aren't you voting for him?
Respectfully, it's not past us, and that's the challenge here. And what I've said to Jim
McCarthy
Jordan,
is no longer a nominee.
What I've said to Jim Jordan from the very start is you have to get the right people in the room so that we can hash this out.
I'm asking about you, though, Congressman, not the right people. You're voting against them.
With all due respect, you can yell at me about it, but with all due respect, if we don't get everybody in the room to hash out the path forward, it doesn't matter who the speaker is, all right? We can elect a new speaker, but we still need 218 votes on the floor to pass our appropriations bills, to deal with aid to Israel, to deal with the crisis in Ukraine, to deal with our border. If we can't compromise within the conference, forget about the Democrats, within the conference, we're not going to be able to govern. And that is the fundamental problem here. So when you had 8 people team up with 208 Democrats to unceremoniously remove Kevin McCarthy without cause, And then they moved to block Steve Scalise because they wanted Jim Jordan. You create a problem within a conference. And what I'm saying is, if you want to fix it, as I told Jim Jordan last week, get everybody in the room that needs to be there and fix it.
Yep.
That's the only way forward.
And don't leave the room until it's fixed.
Yeah, we'll see. There's a vote today.
By the way, we told Jim, stay in the room till you get 217. Don't put it on the floor until you have it.
Agreed.
And he did. He went without it, and we had less votes yesterday than the first round.
It was a gamble, and he lost. All right, thank you so much.
We had it. We. Yeah, I mean, that kind of accurately summarizes it there. They're not happy. They're not happy. And what is Lawler's connection to McCarthy, Bradley? Is he an ally publicly so, or is that just more implied? You're down. It's not, no.
He's a freshman lawmaker, so he's the one who took over Sean Patrick Maloney's seat. So I think partially it's if I had to hazard a guess, a lot of them maybe feel that fealty or did feel that fealty because McCarthy is such a successful and prolific fundraiser.
Right.
And so I think
Lawler's in New York 17. He is one of the 18.
So I'm sure there's something to be said that they'd rather there be no any sort of discord like this, any sort of kind of capture by the hard right sort of just completely disadvantages them. So I think the combination of that makes it so that they don't want to have to answer for everything that Speaker Jim Jordan does in, the Hudson Valley.
Or everything that he did, or
everything that he's known for.
So, I mean, exactly, which includes the insurrection. I mean, and that is, I probably should have mentioned that at the top, because I think for guys like Lawler and the rest of those frontline Republicans, that's the thing at the top of their minds. I mean, abortion's going to be on the ballot in 2024, we know. But as it directly relates to their position within the Republican Party and their position on this issue, they're terrified of ads run in blue states about January 6th and Jim Jordan's role in election denial, which is well documented, which there's much video footage of that one can put in an ad in those districts. And they certainly do not want to have that on their record. Now, what's funny is that Jordan's prospects appeared much better a few days ago, and one of the frontline Republicans, Molinaro, voted for him, right, and endorsed him. So that's not he's probably kicking himself thinking that he got certain assurances from Jordan's camp that they had the votes when they absolutely do not. It is just hilarious to me that they keep trying to the Republicans feel like when they're behind closed doors that they will get more dissension because people are more likely to speak out against a Trump person in private and Trump's pick than they are in public. And when they have to go up against Trump with a vote, that was their calculation, that we're going to basically pressure people by putting it on the floor and make sure that they are in a position where they either have to go up against the base or go up against their interests in a purplish or bluish district. And that experiment has failed, and people are pissed. And the moderates having that strategy to stagger defections so that it looked like he was bleeding votes. I mean, that's ruthless. Jim Jordan, that's not somebody that they wanted to attach their names to. So I have no idea where this goes from here, but I'm loving it. It's great to see the Republicans in disarray.
If I may, if we could just play one more thing, just to also hammer this point home of why Biden district Republicans would think supporting Jim Jordan is kind of a nuclear option for them. Just listen here. I'll get this up in a second, but just listen here to Tom Cole, the Republican from Oklahoma, touting why he wants Jim Jordan to be speaker. I'm just going to get this video up, so give me 1 second.
Okay, perfect. And this is him on the floor speaking in favor of Jim Jordan. Maybe in this clip he was a little bit too honest. And this is exactly as Bradley says, the reason those Republicans are so terrified.
That's not the root of the problem. But unlike any other speaker we've had, he's had the courage to talk about a long-term plan and to get at the real drivers of debt. And we all know what they are. We all know it's Social Security. We all know it's Medicare. We all know it's Medicaid.
Whoops.
No president of either side has been willing to deal with this. No speaker of either side has been willing to deal with this. My friend, our former colleague, John Delaney, and I offered a plan. I still file it every year. John's not here anymore. To go back and do in 1983 what we did then and address Social Security. We never can get any help. This is the guy that wants to create a debt commission, a bipartisan debt commission, and get at the roots of our spending problem. That takes courage.
This is the guy that wants to cut Social Security and Medicare.
And
it's a shame that you can't use footage from the House floor on the in campaign ads, but you can put quotation marks around what he just said there.
Yeah, I bet Mike Lawler, going back to Hudson Valley, and all the Long Island Republicans would love to be like, hey, that guy you supported, do you really want to cut my Social Security? Do you really want to cut my Medicare? Do you really want to cut my Medicaid? Yeah.
Oh.
Seems like a good vote for them to take.
Yes. Thank you, Republicans. Thank you very much for this self-immolation that you're engaging in. I mean, we'll see. Biden's a historically weak nominee, so we need all the help that we can get in order to make sure that the Republicans do not seize power in 13 months. All right, guys, with that, we're going to wrap up the first hour of this program and head into the fun half, where the number is 646-257-3920. We will take your calls and read your IMs. On ESVN today, Bradley will be giving our pick, and I will be giving our picks against the spread. Competition heating up. We both went 2-1 last week, starting to get our groove back, and it's getting more and more intense. We'll float some of the suggestions that you made about what the punishment will be, because we've got to make a determination based on that. YouTube.com/ESPN show today at 4 p.m. Brandon, hello.
Oh, we don't hear you, Brandon.
Your mic is not working.
My mic was off.
There we go. And now it's
I didn't
on.
realize that. Well, I was just saying it's a pleasure to see you. Look at the fresh cut. I'm smooth all over.
Wow. I mean, you look like a new man. And but you are wearing my favorite shirt of yours, which is the Shining one.
Yes, it is spooky season, so I'd like to represent my spooky fans out there. Spooky for reasons other than, well, I mean, entirely related to Halloween. I don't want to, cast aspersions on my fans.
Can I just say, speaking of spooky season, Criterion Channel has a collection of 90s movies on, and I watched When a Stranger Calls Again. Very good horror movie, which I had missed.
I remember that movie.
Yeah.
God. Oh, whoa. Hello, Victor. Whoa.
Wow. Fully supplanted.
Yeah, exactly. That's a creepy movie. Yeah.
What's the movie? When a Stranger? I think I heard.
When a Stranger Calls Again. I haven't. I don't know
it's a sequel.
Yeah, but like it's funny because you don't need the first one at all for it, and it's really well done. It has I don't know what the lady in Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt's name is.
Ellie Kemper.
She's in it?
No, the one who doesn't want to get gentrified out of.
Carol Kane.
Yeah, she's in it.
I love that woman. But
plays Lillian. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I guess I was thinking of the 2006 remake. That's what I saw.
Oh, that movie is terrible.
Yeah, maybe it's terrible.
Do not get them confused.
What is a 1993 version?
When a Stranger Calls, I think that's like the classic. The call is coming from inside the house, right? Am I wrong about that? That's like the origin of that. Phrase.
The original one, I think, might have been, yeah.
Oh, wow. This remake has 9% on Rotten Tomatoes. What kind of movies was I watching as a kid? Anyway, so Brandon, what's happening on the discourse?
Well, we had an episode out for patrons last week, and we're going to try to get an episode out for the SoundCloud this week. Hopefully we'll be able to address the Israel-Palestine what else can we call it, genocide, and also do more updates on the presidential race. Republican primary season is in full swing, and maybe also touch on Trump's many crimes again. Every week new updates.
All right. Binder, what's happening on your many shows?
Sure. YouTube.com/MattBinder and doomedcast.com. Past 2 weeks, basically, there's no other news to really talk about other than, what's going on over in Gaza. So that's what the past two episodes have been about. The 2 weeks ago, really was breaking down everything. And then this past week, sort of focusing on, how to be careful with what you share, because there's a lot of propaganda, disinformation, especially online. On social media like Twitter, aka X.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can check out.
I think that's good. I think it's also not just on social media. I think it's also at, like the BBC.
There's a lot of propaganda.
Oh right, but we can't really do share it. Like we can't just like click a button to repost that.
Right, of course, yes.
Yeah. And Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning. We had 2 nurses from the Robert Wood Johnson nursing strike, which I believe is in day 77. If you're in New Jersey, go on and support that strike. I forget the link. Maybe we'll put it in the thing, but we're going to try to get them on this show too, because they're fighting for safe staffing. Really inspiring to talk to young nurses that saw a little bit of the pre-COVID thing, but have been thrown into a world that is not. Our hospital systems are failing in a massive way, because people have been retiring, so you're losing a lot of institutional knowledge, and you have understaffing to begin with. So even the people who are there haven't been trained as well, and it's all because we have absolutely a psychopathic system that has people looking at these things as sources of profit instead of sources of making sure people get healthy. And so patreon.com/Left Reckoning. It's one of the. It was really nice to do that interview, because there's a whole lot going on now that you don't feel like you can influence, and these are people who are right in our backyards, really standing up against,
Is it Rutgers?
It's a Rutgers affiliated
so
hospital.
Down in New Brunswick. Okay.
Yep, New Brunswick.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Robert Wood Johnson is the hospital. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. All right. Well, check all those shows out. The number again is 646-257-3920. We'll be taking your calls and reading your IMs, and we'll also talk a bit about the hospital bombing a little bit, and some of the new information that's coming out as well. Check us out in the fun half. Bye bye.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? What? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em.
Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Back.
We are back. Sorry about that drilling noise in the background. I think, you guys are going to hear this for a little while because there's a building being built right outside our window. It's
Brandon,
driving
why
me
don't
nuts.
you just Bradley, why don't you just mute Emma and me and Brandon will take over so no one has to hear the drilling. I think that's
I'm going to go to the window and say, "Hey, knock it off."
Typical silencing women.
Right, it's what I'm all about.
I thought it was bees. I assumed it was like someone had got into beekeeping in the office. Like Sam was now like getting into
That would be
apiaries.
something Sam would actually be interested in. So that's not too much of a stretch. I came back in after and you guys were having some sort of conversation that you said you wanted to continue. So teeing it up.
Oh yeah, we were basically just talking about the SBF trial, the FTX trial, and we sort of segued into, I don't know if people saw this news, but that pro-Trump memer, like back in the early Trump days, like 2015, 2016, when he first started running, this guy Ricky Vaughn was really creating like a lot of attention for himself and for the Trump campaign. And he created these fake images that he claimed were just memes, but the law considered them to be like election fraud dissemination or whatever. And there was a whole trial. These memes basically were created to look like Hillary campaign flyers telling people that they could vote via text message, and it provided a fake number.
Was this a New York bender?
This was in New York, yeah.
So actually, this was being decided when I was in the grand jury, but not by my grand jury. But I remember hearing about it.
Okay.
Right.
So
but I'll just say, like,
confirmed.
the demographics of a grand jury in Brooklyn, a lot of black people live here, and I'll just say, like, you do not want to be a white guy doing bullshit like that, because I don't think they're going to take, and which is like good, because like this sort of shit, I think there's a lot of people who like to like hide behind free speech on election interference, whether you're in like whether you're Bolsonaro or like Trump supporters, and I think that shit should come with a really heavy punishment from the state.
Right. And so, yeah, he got like 7 months. I think I said, when I was talking to Brandon, I think I said years by accident.
Yeah,
7 months.
7 years. And I was like, that's extreme for me.
7 months.
That's a little bit, yeah.
That's a little bit excessive.
I split the difference.
He could have got like he could have got like 10 years or something like that, though. It was that was what, because I did a whole episode on this with Michael Hayden from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and he basically went to the trial when it was happening, and he was following Ricky Vaughn's whole thing for a while. And so he could have really gotten a lot. I remember part of that conversation we were having is like, even if he got like 10 years, even we would have been like, yeah, it's probably a little excessive for even what he was doing. But 7 months.
I mean, give him parole, but give him that full sentence.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's turn to the depressing news once again here. Let's play this. Since the hospital bombing, which we received news of on air on Tuesday, which now it's very difficult to get any information on the ground about it, because this is by design. This is part of the internet blackout and the electricity getting shut off in Gaza. Certain actors are able to get ahead of narratives, right? And we don't fully know. The forensic evidence is, as of right now, inconclusive about who bombed the hospital. But Israel has a history of bombing hospitals.
They have bombed hospitals in this sort of last couple of weeks, including that one.
Yes, they also have a history of lying about what they've done and then letting the lies and disinformation spread. In the case of Shireen Abu Akleh, the Palestinian-American journalist who was killed, they denied it and then months later put out a statement being like, yeah, this was us. And it would be very much in keeping with a pattern of what Israel has engaged in for that to be the case here. And I'm not saying that it is the case, but that context could not be more important.
The burden of proof is on them. And also, like, some important context is not only have they bombed hospitals, including that one, they've been giving warnings to evacuate hospitals that international community has resisted.
It's also,
but they've also produced
evacuate where?
Right, exactly. But they've also, I mean, as we're going to find out, have fabricated evidence in regards to this exact incident we're talking about now. So, if we which one do we want to start with? Is Barnaby Rain or
up to you? I haven't seen the Barnaby one, but I've seen both the Channel 4 pretty like sober analysis and the Al Jazeera one, which both are pretty good.
Before we get into the specific debunking, I think it's a little bit of a trap to get into this because I think, as Barnaby Rain here points out, that the broader context is sort of conclusive, and that you don't need to get into any sort of forensic debate in a fog of war maintained by our country. Stopping ceasefires and Israel wanting to continue this bombing. But this is a clip from a discussion with Barnaby Rain, and Michael Walker. And I'll be honest, I think I love to see this because I think one criticism I have of Navarra is they haven't been as maybe courageous on this as some other outfits have been. And Barnaby Rain here, I think, gives one of the best sort of outlines of the actual context and the stakes here. Let's just let him take it away.
Barnaby, the bombing of this hospital has had an incredible amount of impact, regardless of what caused it. But what's your take on this? Do you have an interpretation?
Israel ordered 22 hospitals evacuated. The World Health Organization called that a death sentence for patients in those hospitals who couldn't be moved and so were being left to die. One of the hospitals that Israel ordered evacuated was the hospital that has now been bombed. So Israel said it was going to bomb hospitals, then a hospital got bombed. Israel's dropped more bombs on Gaza this week than America dropped on Afghanistan in the first year of their occupation of Afghanistan in 2001. Fadi Diab, a priest in Ramallah, said, "We hold the occupying power responsible. If it's good enough for a priest, it's good enough for me." And we know that Israel continues to block electricity from baby incubators and dialysis patients. We know that Israel continues to block water from surgeons and elderly people. I mean, people in Gaza don't have access to clean water, food from survivors. And we know that Israel bombs roads after it tells people to flee along those roads. We also know that on October the 14th, Israel targeted ambulances. And we know that before this bombing, Israel had already killed 28 medical staff in Gaza. We know too, as you said, that part of the Israeli playbook is to lie about the attacks, the murders. It doesn't please me to say this. In 1996, Israel shelled a UN compound in Lebanon, blamed it on others. It wasn't true. In 2006, Israel murdered an entire family on a beach in Gaza. The IDF had a quick investigation that said the IDF wasn't responsible. It wasn't true. In 2014, Mark Regev, we've seen him again on our TV screens recently, claimed that UNRWA sites, that's UN Refugee and Works Agency sites, were used to launch missiles. The UN investigated, it wasn't true. Last year, Israeli forces murdered Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, blamed Palestinians. It wasn't true. Journalists can't really investigate what's going on in Gaza because even the Washington Post, which is not, I tell you, a friend of the Palestinian people, says it is, quote, becoming impossible to report from Gaza under the conditions of siege and bombardment that Israel has established. So part of what concerns me here, looking at the Western media, because this whole brutal siege and bombardment campaign by Israel has been an object lesson in the racism that structures everything in our media ecosystem. It has been quite, well, I want to say extraordinary, but I haven't even been that surprised to watch Western journalists rush to report an old blood libel, to rush to report that 40 babies were beheaded by bloodthirsty, savage Palestinians, even though it later turned out there wasn't much evidence for it, completely ignore, by the way, Hamas's accounts of what happened in their attack and just report the Israeli accounts. But then when Israel says, despite this record of lying, when Israel says that they're not sure who bombed this hospital or blames Palestinians for killing their own children, journalists rush to say, of course, journalists who must be measured and take them seriously, including, I should say, some left-wing journalists. And that's concerning to people because it seems to be a kind of double standard that is reeks of racism. Raz Segal, the Israeli genocide expert, is calling what happens in Gaza a textbook case of genocide now. 800 legal scholars have written that they are, quote, compelled to sound the alarm about the possibility of genocide in Gaza. It is clear that Israel is targeting civilians. They've targeted residential buildings, they've targeted journalists, they've targeted medics and medical facilities. This isn't the first case. The question we, I think, should ask is why they're doing this. Why this brutal blanket campaign, cutting off water. If you didn't want to target civilians, you wouldn't cut off water and you wouldn't cut off fuel. Why are they doing it? They don't need to. They have an Iron Dome missile defense system that means that most missiles that Palestinians fire into Israel don't reach targets. They could negotiate the release of hostages. There are 6,000 Palestinian prisoners languishing in Israeli jails without receiving fair trials, serious allegations of torture, which we rarely hear about on the news, though we hear much about Israeli hostages in Gaza. They could negotiate for the release of their hostages. Instead, they're bombing Gaza and killing, by some reports, some of their own hostages. This won't, of course, destroy Hamas. When you carpet bomb people who are living under a colonial siege and constant bombardment, the only effect it can have is to strengthen people's fury, anger, and resolve to resist the colonizing power. So, of course, it won't break resistance. Even if they were to destroy the Hamas infrastructure, something else would emerge in its place. So why? Why are they doing this? It's not, by the way, because Hamas caused the problem, because in the West Bank, where there is no Hamas regime, settlers have attacked funerals in the last week and launched attacks on Palestinian villages, killing parents and children. And the IDF has shot and killed 62 Palestinians in the last week, when I last checked, in the West Bank, which is a place that does not have a Hamas government. And before this latest massacre, 2023 was already the deadliest year on record for children in the West Bank, with one child murdered every week by Israeli forces. So it isn't because there's a resistance enclave that Israel's violent. It seems to have this lashing out violent impulse regardless. The reason is that it's the logic of the colonizer. The reason is that Israelis know deep down, and I'm speaking here of some of my own family members, so it pains me to say it, but they know deep down that they are living in other people's stolen homes. They know that they are living in a state that was premised on an act of ethnic cleansing when 700,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes. That's why Gaza is so densely populated, because most of the Palestinians living in Gaza aren't from Gaza. They're refugees penned in there because they were chased out of other parts of Israel. And that's why the important thing to do now is not simply to call for peace, not simply to call for the end of this massacre, though that is crucial, but to understand that we want a world in which people don't live penned into an open air prison because they're chased from their homes, to call not simply for peace but for freedom, and to say when we see people partying at a rave and then being killed by Hamas operatives, that they were partying 5 miles away from an open air prison. If you move 5 miles from where those people were partying in Israel to Gaza, life expectancy drops 10 years. We don't just want peace and the return of a world in which that is the case. We desperately want people all over the world, in our millions, for freedom, for everyone to be able to live a life of freedom and dignity. And that's why we want victory for the Palestinian people.
Yeah, we can stop it there.
I mean, amazing context, important. That's that's the talk of why liberation is necessary, not just peace. We all want a ceasefire and we want the violence to stop, but without alleviating the conditions of the Palestinian people, that is the continuation of a rolling violence of apartheid. And so that's incredible context. That's necessary. I'm so glad we played that. He lays it out so perfectly. Let's now play the Channel 4 forensic analysis, which is quite measured, of what we know now. To reiterate, we have very little information to go on here. There is a blackout in Gaza, and it's quite difficult to discern. But I thought this was quite even-handed and measured. Al Jazeera came out with its own analysis that I think is really strong, and people can look that up. I'm not sure we'll have the time to get to it. But the Channel 4 one preceded it, and this is their take on the evidence that's available as of right now.
Last night, as every night, news agency cameras locked off in Gaza to record the explosions. At 10 to 7, they pick up what appears to be a rocket above Gaza, apparently exploding in midair. Shortly after, 2 explosions. The second, believed to be in the hospital car park, causes a large and immediate fire. There's no proof that the midair and ground explosions are necessarily linked. We spoke to one eyewitness.
I live very near to the hospital, and we have seen, the neighboring area have seen the bombs dropping on the hospital. The explosion was so massive and so huge, and the mountain fire rising up into the sky was so horrible. We instantly knew that this is the Ahli Arab Hospital. It's the Baptist hospital, the oldest Christian hospital in Gaza Strip.
Dr. Mohammed Al-Naka said there was no warning and about 3,000 people were sheltering here. He said, "We don't know what it was, but we know what it can do after it targeted children who were cut to pieces." Gaza's Hamas-controlled health ministry says 471 people were killed. If so, that's by far the worst single loss of life for Palestinians in all the long wars with Israel. Doctors held a press conference standing in the middle of a makeshift mortuary. It is clear scores of people at least were killed. Moreover, the Archbishop of Canterbury has said the hospital was attacked at the weekend, at least 4 civilians injured. And on Sunday, the Israelis phoned up telling everybody to evacuate. Gaza today, damage caused by an Israeli airstrike. Concrete buildings pancaked, structural collapse over a wide area, splash marks of shrapnel. Large craters are usual if the missile hits open ground as opposed to a building, like a car park. This is what you see at the hospital today. Small craters you'd expect from a mortar strike or artillery round, not a missile. Surrounding buildings have only superficial damage, not structural collapse. Some of the windows of an adjoining church remain intact. This makes a ground-detonating Israeli missile strike unlikely, but it doesn't rule out an airburst munition, which could cause major loss of life, but would produce far less structural damage.
Yeah, that's everything.
So what then of Israel's explanation? Sensing a major problem, they worked through the night to get their version out. Press conference first thing.
Good morning, everybody.
Conclusion, a misfiring Islamic Jihad rocket caused it all.
According to our intelligence, Hamas checked the reports, understood it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that had misfired, and decided to launch a global media campaign to hide what really happened.
They present what they say is 2 Hamas operatives talking about the attack.
بس بقول لك اول مره بنشوف الصاروخ زي هيك والشظايا هذه فبقول لك تبع الجهاد الصواريخ الجهاد الاسلامي.
Hamas call this an obvious fabrication. 2 independent Arab journalists told us the same thing because of the language, accent, dialect, syntax and tone, none of which is, they say, credible. Equally, Israel claims the Islamic Jihad failed missile was fired from
appreciate
here,
that
a
for a
cemetery
second here,
very close.
Because there's an awful lot of people who want to fucking scold us, and I'll just say that they are fabricating evidence about this. To me, look, I'm not an expert on missiles and how they detonate. The circumstantial evidence here and the pattern that we are seeing about this, to me, says about as much as I need to know. Like that, and I would also say broadly, like it actually, like we make this point before, but it doesn't matter what happened, because the point is, like, why are these rockets and why is this situation so kinetic in the first place? Because Israel wants to continue bombing, dropping these thousands and thousands of bombs on these places, and the U.S. wants to support them in that internationally. And even saying that, I want to say I think Israel bombed that hospital, and I say that because, like, because of all this sort of thing. Like, why are you? First of all, also, like,
well, this is not their only lie as well.
On this issue,
I mean, they tweeted out video of a missile that was an hour after the blast reportedly happened.
And they had to delete that.
Had to delete that and edit the tweet.
And I'm sorry, they have this kind of like great, they're bugging the phones of all these Hamas operatives, so they can within hours have this great little podcast for us about them talking about how this hospital got bombed and it's not Israel's fault at all. And then they had no idea about then this is in the wake of a massive intelligence failure. Like this is lies.
I don't know, and it's hard for me to make any declarative statement at this moment. But all of this, to Matt's point,
the burden of proof is on Israel, and they haven't met it.
I absolutely.
And like I think like journalists should be. Go ahead, Binder.
Yeah, I think it's totally right to point out all these things because it's like they're obviously clear pieces missing here that Israel has tried to pull together and had to then retract their own claims of what like you said, that video they shared that they claimed was proof that it was a Hamas missile, a Hamas rocket, I should say, and then they had to take back that video. Like they're clearly just
the BB spokesperson, like saying like, "Hey, we hit a hospital," and then deleting that tweet.
Deleting it, right. Yeah.
And you know why? And it's like even if that wasn't the case, like he acknowledged them hitting a hospital because you know what? They bomb hospitals, and it wasn't new to him. The only thing that was new here is the death toll,
and also the fact that what was so sensitive about this was that Biden was on a plane,
yes.
or he might have no, he was on the plane at this point heading to Israel, and it would make things very difficult for both Netanyahu and Biden in this situation if during that time period Israel had committed this clear war crime. So we still need more say that, like, information. Totally, but
right. Yeah. And what Emma said before, like that's really why I wanted to interject there. We just don't know for sure. Like I think it's totally fine and good to say that we don't have clear-cut evidence while still presenting why it can likely be one way but not the other, but still saying that it doesn't completely rule out the other one. It's just less likely. I think the weird thing is that a lot of media was actually quite careful here, and they're getting like rolled over on this specific thing.
Well, the New York Times, they said Palestinians criticism. Right.
But they're getting rolled over because Israel sees it as it used to. Because you have a whole bunch of people. I said, don't give in to these hospital bombers. People literally think Israel doesn't bomb hospitals because of the ambiguity over what happened here. And the fact is that they do. They do that. They call them up and warn them and say, we're going to bomb that shit. And like that should be an outrage. And any sort of like ambiguity over this thing should not distract from that. But it is. And that's why I think this is like.
Why we're giving the context even when we don't have the full picture.
Because the context is what matters. Because none of this happens under a ceasefire.
This doesn't happen in a vacuum either.
I just wanted to agree with what Matt was saying. Matt Leck, not Matt Bender. I don't remember what Matt Bender was saying, but I vehemently disagree. But no, I mean, I think this really goes to highlight the asymmetry of expectations that exist in kind of imperialist genocide, warfare, whatever you want to call it. But, the expectation is that the oppressed group is supposed to be perfect. It has to always be presenting itself in the most media-friendly, well-considered strategic tone, and our war-hungry media will allow a state like Israel, will allow a state like the United States to try out different narratives for what they want to say happened in this atrocity and not contextualize that. When I was seeing when the hospital first blew up, it was, okay, the traditional, well, Hamas was using that hospital as a front.
Exactly.
And then it became, oh no, actually we didn't do that. It was Hamas's rocket. And now it's like, who knows what happened, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just a level of generosity that war-hungry media that we have only gives to the colonizer, only gives to the oppressor. And the oppressed people, they get one shot to present themselves as good as possible, if that. And if they don't do well, then their suffering is justified.
Yeah,
their suffering is justified then.
Right.
And, I agree with Matt's other point too, that like focusing too much on this particular atrocity is also just another way to, at least subtly distract from the ongoing genocide that has been happening to the Palestinian people, not just since 2 weeks ago, but for decades now. And, it's our media that is selectively paying attention to that kind of atrocity. It has to get really bad, comparatively for our media to turn its eye to Israel and Palestine and the genocide going on there. It's, it's disgusting.
Yeah. Let's keep watching this, because they also address here the claim about the location of where Israel says the rocket launched.
None of which is, they say, credible. Equally, Israel claims the Islamic Jihad failed missile was fired from here, a cemetery very close to the hospital. But look again at the video of the event. The trajectory of the missile doesn't line up with that location. Too high, too horizontal. Confusingly, the Israelis' presentation also says the missile was fired from a location down in the southwest. It can't be both. Islamic Jihad say it was an Israeli missile and they have the warhead to prove it, but they haven't produced it.
I wanted to be here today.
So Joe Biden believes Israel, so does the UN. Much of the Arab world and many beyond it do not. And Israel has form when it comes to war propaganda. Its claims about not being responsible for shooting dead British filmmaker James Miller in Gaza 20 years ago were widely dismissed, not least by a British court. Israel denied shooting dead Palestinian-American photojournalist Shireen Abu Akleh last year, only to backtrack later on admitting they probably did kill her. Just two examples from a long track record. And as we've seen, Israel has already attacked this hospital, and yesterday it's accused of bombing a UN-protected school, killing several civilians. Israel and Hamas can tweet what they like. The truth of what happened here last night requires independent, expert investigation. Not happening.
Yeah, I wish, but unfortunately, given the fact that Gaza is sealed, and there is no internet access in many locations, no electricity or fuel, let alone lack of water and food, that forensic investigation done independently is quite difficult. And I think that is by design, not just for this instance, but for the other instances of Israel bombing civilian areas, including a mosque, and other hospitals, which we know and have been documented before. Mohammed El-Kurd had this point, and I think it's key, that he said, people should realize the Israelis aren't actually trying to prove they didn't bomb the hospital. The goal is creating a distracting, frustrating public debate. They've made the focal point secondary to the mere side point, them denying it. That is, I think, important in understanding what the goal is here. Putting the facts aside as of right now, because it's incomplete, it is clear that because of all that information being basically disproven, and some of their efforts to say, well, no, this is actually the footage. Oh, wait, that was an hour later. Oh, no, these are two Hamas fighters talking. Oh, okay, that's disproved as well. It muddies the waters to such a degree that nobody knows what is true and what is false. And so that is part of it. And Israel has people have such short memories, but like during COVID, they bombed one of the only COVID testing labs, the only COVID testing lab in Gaza. They have bombed ambulances before. They've bombed health institutions, hospitals before, and they've bombed hospitals in this latest 14-day siege. So that is the context that has to be communicated. It just has to be. Otherwise, it is he said, she said, if that's the case. But it's not that simple. And making it he said, she said is just replicating the same frustrating lack of context about the power dynamics in play when it comes to Palestine and Israel. One being the oppressor and the other being the oppressed. That's always how you have to see these stories.
And I, like Eric Levitz has a piece in, like, you don't need to get into, the specifics of this to know that the broader context is damning enough. And I agree with that in itself. But I also think there's a point in these to point out the pattern of lies about these sorts of things. Like, that is a huge problem that you can show to the world like some sort of dialogue and be like, oh, actually, that's just not. And we all just supposed to move on from it and then still be fair. Like, I'm not here for that.
I mean, I think, going to both your point and Matt's point, Emma, is that like, I remember a time where gaslighting was the word of the day for every liberal who wanted to describe being lied to in the worst way or like the least believable way imaginable by Trump. And this is what gaslighting actually looks like when you're talking about the media operating in a way that is meant to make you deny your eyes. There's no better example of that in like at the massive level. And obviously there are better, more communist terms to describe it, like false consciousness and things like that. But to be, shown a pattern of lies about, that heavily are swayed towards one group, be shown video evidence of something happening, and then being told that you should disbelieve the pattern in your eyes when it comes to that sort of thing, even if it turns out to not necessarily be true, is very indicative of what that is trying to invoke. The term gaslight, which is to make you feel like you're going crazy. And I think it does, the fake complexity of the conversation that comes from focusing too much on like one issue in the middle of fog of war, along with the very narrative that they're pushing about Hamas holding weapons in hospitals and, it not being them, and these sorts of lazy propaganda tactics of fake recordings between like fake Hamas agents. I think it does have a sway on a certain type of liberal in our society that can be, coerced into inefficacy just by being told enough times that something is too complicated for them to understand, or that there are two sides to a story, or even that there is some justification for something that makes it okay to like really let your bloodthirst out. Right. And I think, those are Biden's supporters more than they are like Republicans who are, some variation of like Christian Zionist or like just generally racist. But there are just like, a good population of NPR listeners who don't know what to do, and they want to be told that it's something more complicated than they can ever understand, so they can just go back to sleep about it. And they cannot see how very simple the power dynamics make something like this, and also the very clear line that you can draw from, and not that you should have to draw a line from what's going on in Palestine to what you can expect to be happening in the United States to certain communities and, now and also in the future. But they don't want you to draw those conclusions or patterns. They don't want you to think like, wow, we let our police officers train with these people over there. Yeah. And what are they learning? like what could you possibly be learning?
Exactly. Well, I'm glad we covered that, just because I agree with you, Matt, and I don't really agree. I love Eric Levitz's writing. But I don't know if it is helpful to move on from it.
I think I'm of two minds of it entirely. Like I've always said, like, even if this was the case, this is not this is the sort of thing that happens in a war. But I also think like you cannot report about this as if it's just like, let's try to get all the facts and look at the numbers here, because the numbers are being fudged. Mm-hmm.
I also want to just say one more time, I do think it's important to, because then we get into these sort of, I agree with what you're all saying for the most part, but I think, even with the history of, what we know about the Israeli government and how they treat these situations, we know that people will glom onto the one time where it's the other, that's not the case. So I think it's always important.
Oh no, you're right.
Still make sure that
you're right, Binder. Sorry to cut you off, but like that is the reason. That's the jeopardy here, is that a mistake is going to be latched on by people like Richie fucking Torres as propaganda to continue bombing more hospitals.
Totally.
Right, and
we don't need.
Yeah.
And we don't need this one instance. Like, that's the thing. Like, there are multiple instances. So it's unfortunate that that's been the focus, being that, the bombings are ongoing and people are still dying. But that's sort of what happened.
That's why I said we don't have all the facts. I mean, I feel like,
exactly.
I think we have said that completely. But when people are saying, there are a lot of people saying that they do have all the facts because the Israeli government is saying it. It's been confirmed.
Right.
And then there are a lot of other people that are saying, he said, she said. And we're saying, we don't have all the facts, but this is the context.
Yes.
And that is important.
Funny, that's what that one MSNBC reporter
originally
did. Yeah, originally said, and I thought it was a great. He stressed we don't know what's going on because of fog of war. He even said that, and how they're not allowed in. He explained what Hamas was saying, explained what the Israeli government was saying, and then he gave that background context on what the Israeli government has led the media and the people who follow what's going on astray before. And the sort of end note there was, we just don't know for this specific situation yet. But then that next morning you saw people automatically like saying that was the wrong. Oh, looks like he was wrong, and it's not. We don't know yet. We just don't know.
That was
Exactly.
NBC
People-
News
people are
correspondent,
desperate to believe.
Ralph Sanchez.
Oh,
It was
gotcha.
just good reporting from him that we
Yeah.
played on the show yesterday.
Exactly.
Right.
No, I think people are desperate to believe. People are desperate to believe that it wasn't Israel, because then they would have to like rethink this whole global dynamic for sure.
Yep.
And so like it's enough that they said it. It's enough that, well, who can tell? Anything that prevents people from having to actually conclude that this is not an isolated incident. This is one incident in a pattern of behavior that can be easily documented and traced, and it's still only a fraction of the violence. And it's enough to get some people to just turn their brains off when it comes to this sort of stuff. And because it seems crazy, obviously, because for us, I think this is a mask off moment. But Israel, just like a lot of countries in the Middle East, are trying to rebrand themselves as this kind of place that you want to come hang out. I get commercials on YouTube that are just like, visit Israel, and it's just like it's after beaches, and you're like,
Oh my gosh, that's part of this too. Like they get a ton of money from tourism. Israel, it's a big part of their economy, and that is not gonna. That's gonna take a massive hit after this.
Yeah.
When people don't feel safe to travel there after the Hamas attack.
Yeah, Brandon, you're exactly right. Like the broader sort of meta narrative that I'm really sort of like resistant to in the media is, I think, like we said, like I think you need to be as judicious and to the facts as evidence-based as possible on these things. But there's this idea that there is a rush to judgment that we're at risk of doing here. And the problem is that's all trotted out by people who want to forestall judgment forever until Palestinians are gone from the land entirely. And we are not at a risk of a rush to judgment about Israel and what it's doing and what this bombing means. We have had judgment delayed for far too long, to the point where that country cannot, I don't know if they, like the leaders of Israel right now, I don't know if they're capable of like anything but killing and lying about it. And like they have no other they have no sort of like off ramp about this. Like I see some people talking about releasing the hostages. Of course, like the way to release hostages is under ceasefire conditions, and releasing some Palestinians as well. But then you see that actually that's not even really the demand. The broader demand is we need to bomb them. You can't demand a ceasefire. I saw Yair Rosenberg say this. I can't remember what outfit he's with, but he said that ceasefire demands are not realistic unless you can provide a way to make sure like none of this Hamas stuff ever happens. So now you have to kill people until we figure out how to help you maintain an apartheid and an occupation and settlements forever. Sorry, like that's not how it works. We need to work out a different solution to this.
Well, just to that point too, and I think it's worth mentioning, of course, and this is part of that first clip that you played, which was great. Of course, they don't care about the hostages. The hostages are just an excuse to do genocide in Palestine.
Yep.
It's like, it always bears mentioning that when you're talking about fascism or like extreme jingoism or even just white supremacy, that the people who are like the greatest exponents of those ideologies don't care about every single person who would theoretically fall under that umbrella. They care about themselves, and the ideology is a vehicle for them to achieve power. And so the larger excuse that Netanyahu or Israel has to do this to save or help it, not just Jews all over the world but Israelis, is complete. It's just ridiculous. Like imperialism and colonialism, much less apartheid, that's just the narrative that has been pushed by Western societies since we started doing colonialism. This idea that some countries, some populations, some people have to be under the yoke of, imperialism. We call it fascism. We subject other people to it, but they have to be under this brutal yoke of police or military violence in order to maintain safety for this larger group of people. But that's just a myth. That doesn't make people safer. Like, you can blame Hamas Hamas for terrorism, but certainly you can't blame them for creating the circumstances that lead to terrorism. We just, as a country, don't have the language, and we've never had the language. And the little bit of language we had, we stomped out after 9/11 to discuss how cause and effect happens when it comes to terrorism, or how, Western imperialism, colonialism eventually leads to violence that turns and attacks the state. That it has perpetuated against it. So, I mean, It's not surprising, but it's definitely worth mentioning that this is not about protecting Israelis in any larger, context. This is about protecting the Netanyahu government and a handful of fascists within Israel.
Well, that is a great segue, I think, to this old clip here. If we could pull this up, Bradley. I saw this yesterday. Robert Mackey, actually, who's done some work, I believe, before for The Intercept, tweeted out this old video of Benjamin Netanyahu, who is speaking in front of Congress in 2002 here, about the invasion of Iraq. And he's voicing his support here for the invasion of Iraq. And you can see, I think, a lot of overlap in the way that we approach the war on terror and the way that Netanyahu is currently conducting himself in his capacity as prime minister, and how his mentality really infected the Israeli government that already was not treating Palestinians well, but in the past 2 decades or so, the apartheid and the conditions have ramped up in many ways. This is just helpful because you can see how he's speaking to a United States audience here, and this is very much applicable to how he's conducting himself now.
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. And I think that people sitting right next door in Iran, young people, and many others will say, the time of such regimes, of such despots, is gone. There is a new age. Something new is happening.
And that is speculation on your part, or you have some evidence to that effect?
I was asked the same question in 1986. I had written a book in which I had said that the way to deal with terrorist regimes, with terror, was to deal with the terrorist regimes. And the way to deal with the terrorist regimes, among other things, was to apply military force against them.
The way we did in Afghanistan.
The way, for example, I want to answer your question.
I guess I'm running out of time, so I quickly was trying to get there. We've done, I think, what you proposed in Afghanistan, yet I haven't seen that sort of neighborhood effect.
Well, I think there's been an enormous effect. The effect was, we were told that there would be a contrary effect. First of all, people said that there would be tens of thousands of people streaming into Afghanistan, zealots who would be outraged by America's action, and this would produce a counter-reaction in the Arab world.
But I think you're not saying that when you take an action like we did in Afghanistan, we're going to see all the other countries as fold.
No, what we saw is something else. First of all, we saw everybody streaming out of Afghanistan. The second thing we saw is all the Arab countries and many Muslim countries trying to side with America, trying to be okay with America. The application of power is the most important thing in winning the war on terrorism. If I had to say, what are the 3 principles of winning the war on terror? It's like, what are the 3 principles of real estate, the 3 L's, location, location, location? The 3 principles of winning the war on terror are the 3 W's, winning, winning, and winning. The more victories you amass, the easier the next victory becomes. The first victory in Afghanistan makes the second victory in Iraq that much easier. The second victory in Iraq will make the third victory that much easier too, but it may change the nature of achieving that victory. It may be possible to have implosions taking place. I don't guarantee it, Mr. Turney, but I think it makes it more likely.
So the more victories you amass, the easier the next victory becomes. First of all, that it's aged like milk. Obviously, the United States' 20-year occupation of Afghanistan only further destabilized the country. We killed conservatively hundreds of thousands in Iraq, up to 1 million potentially. Our role in the Middle East birthed the militant group ISIS because of how we decimated the region and the the extremism that came from it is a direct result of the United States' bloodshed there and destabilization efforts. Iraq still is not back where it should be, despite our efforts to install our kind of puppet regime there. But when he says that over and over again, I mean, there have been, I don't know how many assaults on Gaza under his watch. It is either it's yearly or every other year when Israel basically mows the lawn, as they put it, in Gaza and with Palestinians. This is the New York Times death toll comparison in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict since 2008. You can barely see the purple until obviously the brutal, horrific massacre that occurred on October 7th by Hamas. Before that, look at these death tolls. I mean, it's not even comparable how many Palestinians are killed versus Israelis. So by his own definition, that would constitute a victory, I would say, each of those years, in terms of the death toll on the Israeli side being much lower, and the death toll of the Arabs, who he, even then in 2002, he was eager for the United States to get involved in killing Arabs. It seems to be his favorite thing. That would constitute a victory by, I guess, standard military definitions, crudely, if looking at those raw figures. And yet, it has only did lead to desperation increasing, so that the Hamas terror attack was in many ways, not the exact attack, but the violence coming back against Israelis was inevitable. Netanyahu, through his and through this philosophy of ethnic cleansing, and just completely saying, well, we will just police Palestinians forever, give them no rights, seal and control their electricity, their water, their food, not have elections, and
negotiate the conditions of their coming extinction above their heads.
Exactly.
With people like Trump.
And Saudi Arabia, cutting off their allies. Like, that only led to further insecurity of Israel. And domestically in Israel, they seem to understand, at least, like, that it was that Netanyahu was a failure. They still support broadly the assault in Gaza, unfortunately, but like, by his own stated objectives, which were false could not be more false in his analysis of the United States' pending invasion of Iraq. When you turn it inward towards him, he could not be more wrong. And then you have to begin to question, is the security of Israel really the priority here?
Yeah.
Or is it the extermination of a certain kind of people?
I mean, it's infantile to act like this sort of scenario is not going to lead to violence against everybody involved, which is like, what would you do if you lived in a house and you were told, that's not your house, that's somebody else's house. Now you go to this city that we are holding under blockade. You can try to be an entrepreneur, or
50% unemployment, by the way, in Gaza.
Yeah. But, what are you going to do?
And how can you be an entrepreneur there when all of
I'm
the
joking.
ports of I mean, I know you are, but
Crypto.
right?
There is some crypto there, honestly. It's one of the few actual case studies, which is why it's probably going to be wound up.
Yeah.
Well, Binance is trying to cut off Hamas's access to their cryptocurrency, which I think is not very Binance friendly, but friendly from Binance. But what can you say?
Which is another reason why I don't think it's good to put stock in these things, the sort of anti-imperial things. But to the extent that they can help tactically help people survive.
Bullprog says ABC News reports that Israel's economy minister says hostages and civilian casualties will be secondary to the priority of destroying Hamas, adding that its tunnel network will become the world's biggest cemetery, in quotes. Thank you, Bullprog, for that piece of information, even though it's incredibly depressing.
Yeah.
Now there's like a hive of tunnels under all of Gaza, so that gives them permission to bomb everywhere. That's very convenient.
Exactly.
Moabs, baby.
Your left testicle says, since the attack on October 7th, multiple instances of terrorism on Palestinians in the West Bank have occurred. Yes, I tried to headline this as well. Still, again, there's the information gap is massive. But armed settlers have gunned down at least 63 Palestinians, including children, since October 7th. No denouncing of this terror by the U.S., UK, or other Western allies. We are supporting terrorism right now. Yep. If terrorism is the indiscriminate killing of civilians, and that is the definition of it, of course, yes, Israel's engaging in terrorism.
I mean, who made those bombs?
No, we're always doing terrorism. That's that's just a Western thing where you define terrorism by who's being terrorized, not the act of doing terror in pursuit of like achieving a political agenda. It's like America is the biggest purveyor of terrorism in the world, and or funder, depending. And I think that's another contextual issue where, you know, people like to forget that, or rather people like to, and by people, I mean some people, like to focus on the Israel-Palestine genocide because it's complex in their heads. And the fact that America funds ethnic cleansing all over the world. We're involved in shadow wars. We fund despots and authoritarians. The Yemenis, the destruction of Yemen by others, Middle Eastern figures, that doesn't get put into the larger pattern too, where like people like to forget that America doesn't just fund Israel and Ukraine, the only two countries that can say that they're like defending themselves. We fund violence around the world where there's way less plausible deniability. People just don't focus on that because it would be, you know, well, I mean, it makes them feel bad.
Yep. All right, let's take a call here. Calling from an 805 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Raz again from Santa Barbara.
Raz from Santa Barbara. How you doing?
I'm good. You guys can choose. Oh, sorry, my voice is like messed up. But you guys can choose between a question. Well, a question. Oh, this is really weird.
It's okay.
Let me drink some water real quick. I lost my voice yesterday.
All good.
A question or a complaint?
Okay.
Whichever's easier to deliver.
Yes. We'll let you go after you ask.
Okay. So I was chilling with my boys, and I was wondering, like, how can men today and masculine people unlearn the patriarchy, like specifically in terms of like male gaze and thinking that they're owed sex, and especially like in this day where in online spaces they're dominated by like, or not dominated necessarily, but just there's so much like podcast bros and passport bros, and there's a lot of like rhetoric that to me feels like we're regressing in terms of any sort of progress. And me as a young masculine person, I feel like it just seems like kind of hopeless in terms of like seeing anything major change in our lifetime. So one of the things that people can do today as individuals systemically in order to unlearn a lot of these ideas.
I mean, I would say to unlearn them, it's kind of, the burden's a little bit on you. I don't want to be rude about it, but I think, you know, it's not POC's and women's and trans people's job to get people to see that stuff. But
I'll interject here, and I'll.
You seem in. Wait, let me just finish
really
quickly.
Right, second time I've tried to shut Emma down today. I think I need part of this conversation.
Exactly. I mean, he needs an education. But just listen to trans people, listen to women, listen to their experiences. Don't just watch Andrew Tate or men. Like, I think it's difficult sometimes for certain men to see women as authority figures. And they don't even really fully understand sometimes, like, why they're more dismissive of, like, you know, why when a man makes a certain argument, it goes home for them more than if a woman does. So it really is just a case of like expanding the consciousness by listening to different groups of people, and listening, not centering yourself or talking. That's, I think, how you can get deprogrammed.
Right. No, I think
But
that's...
what about specific...
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was about to say,
Well,
you know,
I was just gonna...
also, too, is like, this might sound like, you've probably heard this phrase before, but it's true. It rings really true. You just have to see other people as human beings too. You have to view whomever it is you're talking about in this specific scenario. Let's just say women as a whole. How would you feel if you were in their shoes and everything you just mentioned, people were staring you down or expecting something out of you just because of who you were or what that person was trying to do. Like, you really have to just view the other person as an equal. And then, I think, that's not the only thing, because obviously there's other things that you need to do too. It shouldn't just be about how would that make me feel? But I think that's a good first step.
Yeah, I mean, I would also echo that. And this is sort of like, I think, at the risk of giving Jordan Peterson-esque, facts for life. But, I'll do it anyway. The first thing I would say is that, Andrew Tate's like a scam. It's a pyramid scheme. And, and people like him are running pyramid schemes. Not all of them are financial pyramid schemes. Some of them are. Some of them are financial pyramid schemes, but a lot of them are just social ones. They want to be the top of this hierarchy that they create for themselves of sycophantic guys who hang off their every word. And the value for those guys is that they get to feel like they're alpha. They're outside of the matrix. They exist in this state that's now above other men and above traditionally disadvantaged groups like women and, brown people, etc. Although maybe sometimes it's just a all race inclusive, misogynist cult. So I can't speak to all of them, but I would just say, just from a particular life advice, any philosophy that encourages you to uplift yourself by putting other people down is bad.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be looking for how to uplift yourself by owning people as property, women or Black people or, any other group. You shouldn't be looking for ways to play word games to sort of cuck people verbally, before you even enter those conversations. Those sorts of tricks and tips in life just tend to make you miserable because they don't work. And then they, automatically put you into that hierarchy system where you're participating in white supremacy or misogyny or sexism because you're trying to jockey for social position with people who, like Matt said, you should just be looking to sort of engage with on an interpersonal level. So I think it's helpful to see people as people and also to understand when someone's philosophy is inherently negative or toxic because it calls for dragging other people down to lift you up, because you see that a lot with white supremacy, you see that a lot with misogyny.
Appreciate the call, Rosby. Just gotta jump. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for answering that. And Free Palestine, left is best.
Left is best. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we can move on.
I mean, I'll read this IM, though. Courier, 11 seconds. I would suggest to the caller about the MRA stuff to call it out when they are out. It's a bit scary at first, but I promise they'll catch on.
They don't have numbers. That's what I was going to say is I think, and I think it's something to monitor. I saw, Sneeko or whatever got brought up to some of his teenage viewers, and they were saying transphobic and anti-women stuff. And I think the one reason we cover a lot of these sorts of sources of this sort of shit is because it is a problem when people fall into that, and it makes their life worse, frankly. In addition to making them assholes that you don't care about, it also alienates them from the rest of society. I do think I think we can be a little bit too catastrophic about it. I think for what we use for proxies for the youth attitudes, they support abortion, support trans people more than older people. Now, one proxy that isn't trending the right way is people's attitudes to feminism. But I think there are critiques of feminism from the right and critiques of feminism from the left that maybe people are seeing this needs to be more of a egalitarian and
not lean in feminism. Well, yeah, white
not bourgeois feminism.
Yes,
exactly.
Right. And I mean, honestly, the bourgeois feminism is the one that gets the dominant play.
Of course, because we have a bourgeois society. And,
yeah,
and
I see what Matt's saying, but definitely don't. That's egalitarianism is the MRA's favorite way to describe what they want when it's not. So real feminism isn't this, like Emma said, lean in feminism. Feminism is about equal rights, and men benefit from feminism just as much as women do. So that's the word for it. There's nothing like that's the whole thing too. Why are like
well, that's what we think of it, but like as
right.
it's deployed by society, it isn't our version of feminism.
Right.
And, like I think that is going to be
alienating.
alienating.
Right.
Of course
right.
it should be. Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
Right. Like the same thing, like when that caller, I think the caller, like, he was bringing up masculinity and how, I think a lot of this is like, how can I still show that I'm a big, tough, muscular guy and still care about these things or not be a womanizer or something like that. And it's like, what does that have to do with like, and I'm not saying that's exactly what that caller was saying, but I think a lot of people mean that when they mean masculinity. How can I still show that I'm a man's man without, being an asshole? And like, what is that even? Like, what is that?
Well,
There are, women who, certainly work out and look just as tough as men. Like, what does that have to do with being a man? It just doesn't. I think we have to completely get these sort of old school trope mentality like out of our head completely.
Yeah, I agree. Let's do this Ron DeSantis clip probably. I mean, I also want to say, just saw a tweet from Scott McFarlane of CBS saying that the Republicans are saying that the resolution to empower Speaker Pro Tem McHenry is, quote, dead, won't come to the floor for a vote. So once again, my commentary is outdated based on Republicans' inability to get their shit together. So that is unfortunate. But that's the update for you guys. So Jim Jordan seems to be, they're going to, quote, plow ahead and try to change the minds of the 22 defectors. Good luck with that. So Ron DeSantis, did you guys know he's still running for president?
Who, Weird Ron? Yeah, I kind of figured.
Or DeSanctis, which still is one of the more bizarre but also hilarious Trump nicknames.
I do know he's changing the footwear industry for short men. We got new ideas I've never even known about.
I know he needs to drop his fit so that Binder, you can get in on it.
He's doing that. He's like kind of like working on his, how like David Blaine could do the close-up magician thing where like he gets on his tippy toes, but you don't notice, so you think he's floating. That's what Ron DeSantis has mastered.
Oh, I mean, I want to hear his tricks, honestly. That's maybe what he can do. He could just be a magician after this because he's not going to have a political career. He's here he is talking about Trump now. He's finally criticizing Trump now that it's too late for him to win. And means he's desperate, means it's funny. If this is him talking about Trump's response to what's going on in Gaza and with Israel. Not Gaza, because Republicans don't care about Gaza. What happened with Israel?
President Trump seemed to walk back some of his comments on Israel this afternoon, tweeting hashtag I stand with Bibi and praising the military. Do you have any reaction to that? Do you think that, why he's walking back those comments?
Look, I mean, I think we have the Donald Trump on the teleprompter where he's reading what's on there. Then you have the Donald Trump when he gets off that teleprompter, and that's the real Donald Trump when he starts speaking about those things. And so he attacked Bibi after the country suffered the worst attack it's had in its modern history, when they're just created a war government. They're preparing to do a ground invasion in Gaza, and he did that because Bibi congratulated Biden in November. That's why he did it. He hates Netanyahu because of that. That's about him. That's not about the greater good of what Israel's trying to do or American security. And so I think it's fine to kind of clean up and do all that. I would say, go out, get rid of your teleprompter. Don't use that as a crutch. Go to debates. Show up and debate for 2 hours. And then we'll be able to see kind of where he's really coming from. So we've seen over the course, every interview, every time he's gotten off the teleprompter for like the last 2 months, they've had to clean things up for what he's saying. So I just want to see, the Donald Trump, this is a different Donald Trump. In 2016,
oh my God,
he was freewheeling, he's out there, barnstorming the country, doing all this. Now it's just a different guy. And
you've changed, Donald.
So is he freewheeling, which is what he's saying, or is he not? So he's not free. That was the last part. He completely contradicts himself.
I miss the old guy.
Yeah, right.
I miss
what
the
are you
old
talking about? He
Donald,
was just talking about like
you
sharks.
You change. You won't come to my party. But he just said Well, when he goes off the teleprompter, that's when you see the real Trump. So, like, that's when he's freewheeling. But I saw a different Trump in 2016. He was freewheeling. Dude, you gotta figure out some message consistency here.
This has to be the highest level we've seen the debate me bro culture get to. Ron DeSantis literally going out there going, debate me bro to Donald Trump. Get out, aren't you going to debates, man? I want to debate you.
No, your voice is way deeper than his was. He was very whiny in this clip. He was as whiny as we've seen him. I would also have suggested that he bring a podium because he clearly did not know what to do with his hands. It was very distracting, you know. Not to be racially charged, but it's like a white person dancing, doesn't know what to do with his hands when he's standing there. So they're just flailing them wildly.
Yeah.
I mean, well, that's just his whole complaint, right? Flailing wildly.
No, he is kind of the human embodiment of the white man, like dance floor dance, right? When you do that with your hands, just sway side to side.
You've changed, Donald.
Which is also coincidentally my dance, because I don't know how. But yeah, like the idea that any Trump voter is going to react to this in any way is hilarious because they like that he criticizes everybody. The average voter in this country, Republican voter, they don't care about Bibi Netanyahu, okay? They like Israel because they may be evangelicals and they want, you know, the prophecy to come, and they're evangelical Zionists. And they also like that Israel is violent towards brown people. And that's kind of the extent of it. There's no national fealty to Netanyahu. That's more like the Republican power players who feel that way.
He's losing the racist vote for sure.
Yeah.
I was about to say also there's the cohort who are against Israel and don't like Netanyahu because they're Nazis and white supremacists.
True, but like they understand those Nazi people, like their anti-Semitism is secondary right now to their pure joy,
envy about bombing brown people,
in seeing brown people get bombed. So I don't know how actionable it is, but at a different date, when it's more convenient for them, their anti-Semitism will certainly come to the surface when it comes to Israel.
I would love if I could, bring somebody back from the dead. I would bring back the Italian poet Dante Alighieri and have him write another canto about the Divine Comedy, about the circles of hell, talking about Ron DeSantis being stuck on camera, basically demonstrating his impotence, just complete. Because the thing about like Trump is only upset because of the personal slight. Like that is a fun thing for us to say all the time. But he says it in the midst of like 2 minutes where he's trying to land a thing about a teleprompter that's from like 2012.
Oh, that's the other
criticism
thing
of Obama.
I mean, they do this. Now they do it with Biden to less effect because I think even Republicans are like, we all know everybody uses a teleprompter.
Teleprompters are useful like things
for speeches.
Yeah, and also I just don't associate Trump with like a teleprompter. Like I don't know what he's even trying to communicate here. Like what has Trump not given enough like rambling speeches about water pressure recently? He was just talking about like electric motors and shocking you to death with like in shark infested waters last week. That's about as Trump as it gets.
That's the fun thing about Trump is actually like you can tell when he's sticking to a script and then like sort of editorializing it because it's the first time he's ever read it.
Yep, right, exactly. All right, let's take another call here. Calling from a 760 area code. Who's this where you're calling from?
Hello, it's the other Dan from California.
Oh,
not
Dan from California.
Not I am Dan.
Other Dan.
Yeah,
from California.
I'm
not
shocked.
the
There's another Dan in California. I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's Dan the mailman, the Oceanside guy.
Gotcha. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, interesting topic. You guys kind of touched on it earlier in the show, and also you got a little bit with the last caller as well in regards to. I think one of the worst things for just humanity in general was the tactic used by the tobacco industry, manufacturing doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
copied by the oil and gas industry as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And it just completely erodes the integrity of progress. And my advice to just talking about the last caller is just have the conversation with people, get and maybe meet on what is agreeable, maybe not immediately jump onto trans issues because, change is scary for a lot of people. And, it's like these issues are very important, but maybe talking to your crazy uncle that, why the world is the way it is, maybe talk about, well, why are jobs, not paying as well as they used to be back in the day. And meeting on a level that is agreeable and say, hey, you know what, that, my crazy, nephew is, he might not be, I might not agree with him on everything, but I agree with him on jobs. And then you kind of get the wheels kind of turning. And so just meeting him on that level is, I think, is what the most important thing is. And questioning why the world the way it is,
Well, I appreciate that advice. Thanks for the call, Dan.
Okay, thank you. Have a great one.
Good points. Yep. Bye. You too. All right, we'll take another call here. This will probably be our final call of the day. Calling from a 415 area code. 415. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Spacco from San Francisco and the voice of the scam economy.
Wow.
Hey, Spacco.
There he is. What's up, Spacco?
Is it
My opportunity to...
Good to hear from you.
I was going to ask, is it rude to point out that you sound like the movie phone guy? Sorry,
You were right. The movie phone.
Phone.
Yeah, exactly. Almost close, but no cigar.
I want to talk about the way that they talked about death threats and threats in general that's being used by the Republicans. And I was last night at Alex Wagner. She talked about death threats as a political strategy. And I have talked about this on the Scam Economy show, as well as Doomed with Matt specifically, which is what can we do to actually focus on the victims, because the people on the right oftentimes push the people on the left into defending threats under the guise of free speech. And I think that the question that keeps coming up, which is how they position it so that people always fall into this, well, I'm a big believer in free speech and the First Amendment. And instead of saying, how do we protect the victims? And is there a way to stop this? And the reason I said this about Matt's show is because we talked about, and I've successfully managed to help a hospital in Boise, Idaho, St. Luke's, sue for defamation in a civil lawsuit, a group of people threatening, harassing, and intimidating hospital employees. And the case was, they won for $52.5 million. And this is the thing that I'm thinking about with all the Trump's threats of witnesses, etc. While we figure out the law, all the threatening still happens. What is our publicity message? What is the message that the media and people on the left can come up with instead of constantly figuring out, well, we have to defend whatever? No, what is that?
The message on Trump?
No, a pointed message. We need a proactive message to say on that these threats are bad. These kinds of harassment, intimidation is damaging, and there are things that can be done and should be done, instead of just throwing up our hands and saying, "Oh well, they're getting away with it again." Like there are.
I mean,
laws.
I don't know. I mean, like what first of all, I think I don't understand. I don't know if it's valuable to get in a messaging battle in an ongoing court case. Like, it feels like that's the judge's job, and the gag orders have been applied. So, Sam has a ongoing policy on the show. I think it's a good one that, once these court cases start, coverage of them, that's up to the jury and their individual situation. So I don't know if it is helpful, frankly, for the Democrats to have a message on that.
Really, I find this fascinating because I really think that this is one of the problems. Is we are constantly afraid of going into this and saying, this is bad because they get pushed into this, well, you're going after them politically. Somebody needs to come out and say, this is bad because the DOJ is afraid of it, of saying it. And the Republicans will turn it around and say, "What don't you like? Free speech, or what is your problem?"
Yeah, I agree that. I mean, I just don't know if that's on the top of the priority list. But point well taken. Thanks very much, Baco. We're gonna let you go. All right.
Okay.
Have a good one. Bye. All right, guys. We're gonna wrap up some calls, or wrap up the calls here. Turning on the voicemail. Read some IMs. I really didn't read many IMs, so we'll read a few here. Brother Harlan Crow, have you guys covered John Fetterman's disgusting statements where he approves of and encourages Israel's right to commit genocide against the Palestinian people? I really thought he was just campaigning as pro-Israeli Israel to win the primary, but Jesus Christ, he's immediately lost his support from the majority of his constituents with that one. Well, I don't know about that.
Who knows? I mean, certainly he lost a lot of support from people who give a shit and have humanity. It's interesting to contrast between Kassar and Fetterman. I think, Burgess was in the Current Affairs when he was running, saying he's progressive except Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
That was telegraphed pretty clearly. He genuinely believes it.
Yeah.
In a way that I think Kassar is just like wanting to avoid and duck, is my sort of judgment, looking at like the initially being a little bit uncourageous and then signing on that thing. I think some people just make the calculation that they don't want to make this an obstacle, but Fetterman is a rabid supporter of Israel bombing civilians.
I'm incredibly disappointed. I was hopeful that it was more cynical and electorally based, but it seems sincere. And also, he's not up for re-election for like 5 more years. So you can't even make that
Plenty
argument.
of time to figure out a replacement.
Jay Tingle, I'm not eager to contradict Kowalski, but you should definitely hook up your hot water line to your bidet. Not only is warmth important when it comes to cleanliness, you should discharge both barrels. Disgusting. Thank you, Jay Tingle. But I don't even know the context of that. Was that on the show yesterday?
Yeah, we had a Hello Tushy, and someone said it'd be dangerous to put the hot water line into your Hello Tushy. I don't have a Hello Tushy, but I do think if I did, I'd probably try the hot water line.
I don't really even want to talk about this. Congressional baseball fan, the footage of the explosion and aftermath of the hospital strike in Gaza, in my analysis, is consistent with a Hellfire missile equipped with a thermobaric warhead. That type of weapon is specifically designed to kill people on the ground and in vehicles by igniting aerosolized fuel. This would kill a lot of people in a concentrated area without doing much damage to surrounding buildings. The IDF has Hellfires and multiple aircraft platforms to launch them from, and they have used them extensively in the past, including on assassination missions in Gaza. I know this is speculation, but these are the facts about Israel's capabilities and past use of the weapon.
No, it's welcome.
Well, thank you for the information.
Yeah, if we're going to speculate about, it looks like that crater isn't cratering how we want it to crater for what we expected. Like, it's good to have other missile experts say that's maybe not as conclusive as it was suggested to make Joe Biden's visit a little bit easier.
Daredevil, with all the horrific news of late, and I look to MR for guidance, but I'm losing my faith in the left. Emma, will you go on record and condemn Amy Schumer? Do you stand up with comedy? Your silence is deafening. I do. I mean, what? Bleh, disgusting garbage. I mean,
propagandized.
I can't even believe it.
Folks.
Yeah. Screw her.
Another celebrity deleted one and said they were high when they tweeted.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who?
Sarah.
Oh, she said that?
Yeah.
Well, at least she
at
said
least
that.
she deleted the tweet, so that's good. But yeah, I mean, people are propagandized and alarmed, and they don't have good information. I think is probably the most charitable way to be.
It's like people that just started engaging with this conflict, and it's only through Instagram memes as opposed to understanding the full history of Palestinian oppression.
It's a shame though, because I thought Amy Schumer's coming. I don't remember Sarah Silverman's as much, but Amy Schumer's was funny.
So was Sarah's.
Sarah's, I think Sarah's was too. Yeah.
That's why when she came on the show, I almost had a heart attack because Sam's friends with her, because I used to watch her special Jesus is Magic on repeat.
I forgot about that. Yeah, and
her show.
Look,
program.
I remember when Amy Schumer was doing stand-up, and she was just like an opener in New York, and I would see her, and I thought she was funny doing stand-up 10, 15 years ago. But I didn't think her show or anything she's done when she got popular was so great.
Her show's good. I
was
don't
one
think
good
her
sketch.
stand-up. I don't think her stand-up's good.
The sketch was really good. That was it was a military simulator, but you play as a woman, and there's some.
No,
very funny.
I love the sketch that she does about like it's the song. It's making fun of the One Direction, like "You're beautiful with no makeup," and then she takes her makeup off, and they're like, "Put it back on" is the rest of the song. Like making fun of those boy band songs, whatever. It's pretty good.
And for Sarah, my favorite of her work, and this isn't a diss. I think this is real. I love this movie. Vanellope in Wreck-It Ralph. Great work. I think that's great.
Unaware of that.
She should have done more voice acting. Like she has a great voice actress voice. But this is all. Yeah. Oh, and the other sketch that Amy Schumer does, where it's a Friday Night Lights parody, and they're just trying to get the football players to stop raping people.
Right. Well, that's it. The one I was talking was a rape. Is like you're playing a video game, and it's like, are you going to report this? And nobody's going to listen to you.
Okay, so anyway, I do condemn
now
whatever
canceled.
they've been posting. Yes,
Yeah,
they're now
They're
canceled.
posting
Yes.
bad. They need to stop posting.
Yes, please stop
in support of
posting.
genocide.
Yeah, please. Okay, I already read that. Courier 11 seconds. Oh my God, Matt Leck is the hugest nerd in history. I love you, Matt.
What's that in response?
That's probably
Because of who you said you wanted to bring back from the dead,
dead,
and probably
the
maybe you should contact the Guinness Book of World Records as the very first person in history to drop that name to that question.
But that's what makes Matt great.
All the Allighieri heads out there.
Fratter 12. Hopefully Rhonda will make Zionism seem as cool as he made anti-wokeness.
That's an interesting split going on. With there's a big long thing Dave Rubin did. We covered it on Left Reckoning, where they're trying. They do like 20 minutes on like, look at how crazy the left is supporting terrorists, and then it's like, also we disagree with Tucker in the most polite way, where we're going to try to pretend like he wasn't actually saying like he was actually saying.
Right. Happy camper from the beginning. Biden has failed the conflict in Gaza. Primarying incumbents should be the norm, so they have to defend their failures. I hear you. Phineas Erb, please clip Brandon's defining terrorism. Very well said, and definitely context that gets lost too often. I'm sure we will. Rob from Dedham, Nelson Mandela was on the U.S. terror list in 2008. Yes, on my I've been trying to use my Instagram, which I never use, to post more about Israel Palestine, partially just to scream at people in my personal life in a way. But but also I posted Mandela's comments from 1990 on Palestine, which I think are said.
Hamas is like what you would expect a group to would have developed if the ANC had been completely snuffed out.
Yeah.
Because Mandela was very clear that the MK avoided a sort of terroristic. This is in A Long Walk to Freedom. I believe one of the chapters in the teens. He point blank says we consider terrorism as impractical because it would get the public against us. But the other things the MK did, I support under the conditions there. And if Mandela was never let out of prison, was killed, and all the ANC members were killed, and a more extremist group sprouted up under maintained apartheid, then it would have been the apartheid South Africa's government that the violence had been ratcheted up like that.
Yep. Dave from Jamaica, thanks, Matt, for speaking up about the bombing. I feel like I'm being gaslit 24/7 by these pro-Israel nutcases. Minnesota Teamster, part of the most recent season of blowback outlined the CIA fabricating evidence about a Soviet shoot down of a Korean airliner to make the Soviets look like monsters and not a tragic mistake. Not to mention when the CIA fabricated evidence that led to the Iraq War. Leftists need to realize not just because they saw it in the Western press doesn't mean it's not bullshit to influence popular opinion. Yeah, and speaking of blowback, Noah Colin has been, somebody who is very skeptical, to put it mildly, about the claim about the hospital. And Noah's one of my, the best people I think that you can follow to contextualize the history here, given how much research he's done for blowback and how much he knows what U.S. empire and its affiliates will do. I'm Woking from home says, what other choice did we have but to doubt the Israeli explanation? Taking them at their word would not be an informed decision.
Precisely.
We're in the fog of war and made, in our judgment, an informed decision.
And they have the fog machine.
Yep. Kid tested Brewer approved. Ricky Vaughn sounds like a NASCAR driver that got suspended because he kept wearing a holster with loaded guns during races.
Oh, Ricky Vaughn is a fake name. It's Charlie Sheen's character in Major League. That's why he went by that.
Oh, okay. I was going to say if that actually happened in NASCAR, that'd be hilarious.
Yeah, the guy's real name, I can't remember. Hold on, let me look it up.
While you look it up, I'll keep reading.
Douglas Mackey. Douglas Mackey.
Gotcha.
But no one knows who that is because the guy went by Ricky Vaughn, so that's why I use Ricky Vaughn.
Grunkle Chubb says, has the MR crew heard of the trans woman running for Alabama House? Her name is Sylvia Swain and is running in District 55. Her election is on October 24th, and it would be really cool for Alabama to have its first trans representative. I have not, but we'll look into it. Anarcho-Bidenism, FIMA, the Al Jazeera video you and David Dolbo shared on Twitter has some factual errors in it about the Iron Dome that fundamentally undermines the entire claims. Yeah, I saw that. I unshared it after that. So, you know, I trust Al Jazeera generally. They're some of the better on the ground reporting about Palestinians, but when I saw that, I unshared it. All right, 3 more. Brother Harlan Crow. Also, I gotta plug Hassan Piker for raising over $1 million with his community for Palestinian charities. He will be on the Piers Morgan show today to discuss Israel if anyone is interested to watch. I'm very interested to watch that.
Also, was it Noah Cohen on, I believe, going on also with Ofer Kasif, who is the Israeli member of the Knesset, who's been ethically suspended for a month and a half for saying, hey, don't use this as an excuse to commit genocide.
Yep. Antonin Scalia's Ghost. Celebrities are the last people we should look to for guidance on global affairs. Most of them are just vapid airheads. Yeah, and the celebrities that aren't sharing anything, guaranteed they're having incredibly, like, don't, it's not right, but don't take, like, other celebrities' silences as like complicity in the sense that they're having definitely many PR calls with people on their team. But it just makes Gigi Hadid and others.
I was going to bring up her. Did you see the death threat she's getting? Her whole family. It's. I don't know if you reported on it here.
It makes
that
her
shows you
more impressive. Yeah.
Right.
And she's Palestinian. These freaks. The Israeli government's tweeting at Gigi Hadid from their official account.
Yeah, and you look at her statement versus compared to some of the Israel supporting statements, and like complete humanity versus bloodlust.
Yep.
What happened to Alicia Keys, who wasn't even talking about it to begin with?
Yeah.
You saw that too, right? She was just wearing a...
I have the details.
Alicia Keys posted a photo of herself wearing a green and black like motorcycle jacket. And then someone it was answering the question of like, what did she want to like do before she died or something like that. And she said she's always been really interested in paragliding. And people took the photo because green and black must mean support Palestine colors, and her you referencing paragliding as she's coming out in support of Hamas.
It's insane.
And then she deleted it once all the hate was coming towards her and put out
it was a song lyric, right?
I'm not even sure about that.
I think it was one of her lyrics.
Well, when she was
but
saying,
it wasn't even political or anything.
She was just saying, I've always wanted
it.
to hang glide.
And
so then she made clear, like to be clear, that is not correlative to the October 7th attacks.
And then people came out and said, bullshit, if that was true, you wouldn't have deleted it. So there was no way for her to win.
That's absolutely insane.
I love that Alicia Keys is...
I love the idea of her like sending out a quoted message.
Invade Israel.
I wish I could have been a terrorist that killed a bunch of people.
Keep on falling. Over Hebron in my paraglider.
That's just the insecurity of like the fascistic mind, obviously.
I know.
Like, at one time, like Eve Bartlow like thought a free parking sign was free Palestine. And again, she was
like, I almost crashed my car or whatever.
Again, like this is, and they're not victims in the way that Gazans are. Obviously, these are victims of Israeli propaganda.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And like fear mongering, and that we need to, and this is exactly so that we can tell hospitals in Gaza to evacuate and bomb the shit out of the neighborhoods.
And the final IM of the day, Brennan from Kentucky. Emma, can you mix in mentioning driving your Bugatti or at least emphasize cleaning rooms being important so I can take your points more seriously? Brennan, I will try that next time. Thank you for the suggestion. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Great show. Appreciate you all. Check out Scam Economy, Doomed, Left Reckoning, The Discourse, ESVN Today.
Leftist Mafia tonight.
Leftist Mafia tonight. We will see you all tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know